All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I don't know who's going to join me for this. I want to thank everyone who gave likes ahead of time. I know at least one person in Canada has been on me about when you're going to interview Dr. Neal. So so I have Dr. Neal backstage. So I'm going to play my intro, and I want to respect his time and mine. And on the other side, I'm going to give a few introductory points, and then I'm going to jump in, and we're going to talk about his book, Beyond Death and Jail. All right, I'll see you on the other side of my Curtis School introduction. So, where did this topic come from? So, I'm going to admit that because of where I come from, see, in this world, we're all living in different worlds, and not everybody is privy to the same information.
That we will rush to finish things that are important so we can do things that are not. And I believe it's an immaturity there. People just they don't understand that, life isn't about having fun all the time. You have to have fun sometimes. I agree. But as an adult, there's time where you have to just say, okay, listen, I got to get down to work right now. And I don't think enough of us value that time or really understand the fruits of that labor. Somehow we think things are just going to be without that kind of effort. And culturally, there's a deficiency there. That's why I always say that there's no political solution for cultural deficiencies.
So, where did this topic come from? So, I'm going to admit that because of where I come from, see, in this world, we're all living in different worlds, and not everybody is privy to the same information. All right, everyone, welcome back to Big Discussions, my original channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you are on the replay gang, please let me know what you think about any of this. So today I have a special guest. I do a lot of thinking these days, and if I could spend the rest of my days writing and interviewing interesting people about their works, that's what I would do. And so for the last couple of months, the master teacher calls it punching the clock. I've been doing what I call filler content, covering what's going on. But I've been, in the meantime, setting up interviews here, and I want to focus on other authors and their writings. And so today, Dr. Ronald Neal is going to join me to talk about his book, Beyond Death and Jail. Please make this interactive. If you guys have comments or thoughts or questions in the chat, I have my questions. For the time that we have, I'll entertain those that pertain to the topic. So Dr. Neal is backstage, so I'm going to be quick with my opening monologue. I'm going to open this by saying, and we're going to allude to this in our discussion, most of you know about my credentials. I introduced myself as Dr. Dunbar. My background is in the hard sciences, so this is the University of Michigan's medical campus. And when you look at this, think about any university, any institution of higher learning across the country. You have a section of the campus that deals with biomedical research, the hard sciences, physics. The University of Michigan has a very well respected business school, an engineering school, a law school, and there are also schools for the humanities and religious studies and literature and art. I didn't really know what my peers were learning in those areas. Okay, I knew what I was doing. I was dealing with molecular biology and proteins and drugs. But as I progressed in my education, I really didn't understand what the humanities were all about, and what religious studies and women's studies and how those would apply in the real world. And I gained a better understanding of that after being in the YouTube streets and listening to Dr. T.S. Johnson and listening to Dr. Ronald Neal, and as we'll describe how these studies actually influence the population on the outside afterwards, because they do influence the population, policy, politics, everything. Another piece I'll throw in here is the generations. I'm a Gen Xer. Dr. Neal is a Gen Xer. And in reading his book, I've really come to understand more so than I did before that we've lived through some things. We've lived through a bunch of changes, much of which, as Gen Xers, we did not understand. I did not understand. And I think even my elder generation, the boomers, the Black boomers in particular, we've been living through changes that we're starting to see the fruits of now, or we've been seeing the fruits of these things for the last 10 to 15 years, but we didn't really understand things that were being put in place from the 70s onward, both politically, institutionally, in terms of our churches and our communities just in general. We did a lot of this we lived through, but we didn't know we were living through it or what it all meant. And the last item I'm going to show before I bring Dr. Neal up is this one, because I think he really touches upon this in his book. And a lot of people are talking about this now. This is from blackdemographics.com. And it's the Black marital rate tracker. Okay. I'm gonna ask him about George Fraser at the end, but Black people were very married in the up to the 1970s. Okay. And then something happened. Okay. Something happened with both Black men and Black women, to where the divorce rates went up, or even the marital rates just went down. So I just wanted to use those as jumping off points for my discussion with Dr. Neal. And with that, I'm going to bring Dr. Ronald Neal up, and we're going to talk about his book, Beyond Death and Jail. Dr. Neal, welcome.
Hello. Welcome to you. I'm glad to be here, man. Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here and agreeing to talk about your great work here. I know that a lot of our audiences know who you are, but this will be valuable for the rest of the talk and for new people coming in. We were talking about this before the stream started. You're from I thought it was South Carolina, but you're actually from Florida. Talk about your background a little bit.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in the state of Florida. Born in Tallahassee, Florida. Interestingly, so I was born in Tallahassee. I spent the first 5 years of my life in Chicago, Illinois. My mother is from Georgia. I have on my mother's side the Matrifocal side of my family. This is a Georgia, Florida family, what have you. My father's side is in Mississippi and Illinois, Chicago side, and what have you. So the first 5 years of my life were in Chicago, and then we relocated to Miami, Florida, where I grew up. So grew up in Miami, Florida. From the time I was 5 to the eve of my 22nd birthday. And so I grew up in late 70s, the 80s, early 90s, and up until the time I graduated from college. I went to Florida International University, and then moved to Atlanta, Georgia, to attend a theological school. That was the Interdenominational Theological Center there. And then the story continues. I went to Nashville, and from Nashville, Tennessee, I went on to South Carolina. From South Carolina, North Carolina, where I presently am.
Okay. Did you, since this comes up in the book, and you mentioned the term matrifocal, Was your family headed by women, or were there male figures around, or what was your experience?
Yeah, so my family was led primarily by women, and I use Matrifocal in the book, but just I would say when I have in informal conversations with others, I'd say I grew up in a matriarchy, you know, and that is so. My mother is one out of 10 children, and her parents, my grandparents, they had six males and four females. And my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, as the story was told to me, I never met him in my life. He walked away for whatever reason. Something happened. There was family stress. He could not sustain a family in South Georgia. Um, it's one of the stories. It's a story that's very familiar with what that Black people are very familiar with. The man says, "I'm going to go to the store. I'll be back." Blah 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 blah. He goes, and he never returns. And so what happened was my mother's oldest brother became the head. He became the patriarch. That was my uncle Carson. Um, so he led the family during those years. But he became a military man, and he went off to the military and um, created his own family, created his own thing. Um, he was based in Colorado Springs, and he created his own thing. So the rest of the family had to, they created their own. They did what they had to do and what have you. The rest of the males in the family, unfortunately, they never rose to prominent status, socially, economically, and what have you. And my uncles lived very tragic lives. And so by the time I came around, um, the women were the prominent figures. So there's my mother's older sister, Thelma, who is now deceased. My mother was right below her, and then she had two younger sisters, or what have you. So when I was coming along um, in the late 70s and early 80s, the women were holding everything together. And my uncle Carson, he was in a different part of the country, and as I was coming of age, he was just somewhere else. I never really had any relationship with him, but he was a prized male in our family, you know, because he went to the military and he spent decades in the army and he retired and he created a family and his children did pretty well in life. You know what I mean? But where we were in South Florida, it was the women, all of my aunts, and what happened is that everyone who procreated tended to produce more females than males. So there are few males in my family, my mom's side. I never really had any contact. So my mother raised me. I was, I was, I wasn't. My parents were not married when I was born, and there was issues there with my father and everything like that. So my mother, she met him. My mom was a nurse professionally. He was a physician. They both met in Nashville, Tennessee, and she followed him to Chicago um, as he went and did his residency in Chicago and Cook County and what have you. And I guess she thought something was going to happen between them or what have you. And she wound up getting pregnant. And so he didn't want to have a kid. He didn't want to get married. My mom was the first generation of Black women to be a part of the wave of unmarried single women raising children by themselves. And I would say that my mom chose to do that. That is, she was a nurse in the 60s and the 70s. She made good money. Things didn't work out between she and my father, and she had concluded that she could do it by herself. And that's basically what she did. Now, at the same time, I was embraced by my paternal grandmother, and she took ownership of me and what have you. And so I had contact with her even after we left, up until the time I was 7 years old when she died. So she died when I was 7, and then my paternal grandfather died when I was 8 years old. And so when my grandparents died, my paternal grandparents died, that kind of it ended in many respects my relationship with my father. And so I grew up in Florida in this matriarchal condition with 3 other aunts, in addition to my mother, and other cousins who were female. Most of my cousins, the bulk of my cousins are female, and I'm one of the few males in my family. Kind of some on our hands. One of the few. I'm the only one who went to college. I'm the only one who has gone as far as I've gone.
Wow. Okay. There was a lot there. One of the things that stood out to me was you said your mother, and I'm gonna walk gently here.
Yeah, it's okay. It's fine. It's fine. I don't have
No, I'm thinking about how in the last couple of years, what I've learned about how much of a landmine it is talking about what the women in our family chose to do, and what in the changeover in the decision making from previous generations from them versus what's come forward. So that goes back to my little monologue about something changed from the 1970s
Yeah.
onward.
Yeah.
So and talking about what women decide to do with their bodies is a very, very, that's a prickly pear.
Yeah, most definitely. And I can say this without any qualms or hesitation. Yeah, my mother believed that she could raise me by herself without my father. Because my dad did not want to get married. He didn't want to have a kid. He was in his residency at Cook County Hospital, and this is a story I was given. You know, um, later in life, I tried to get his side of the story, but that's another story. But I would say this, and 'cause I live with my mother, so she was a nurse. My mother went to FAMU, Florida Agricultural, Mechanical University. She was the first person in her family to go to college. She came from a farm, rural family, um, out of Florida, Georgia. You know, one child out of 10 kids. You know, and um, yeah, so she went to college and she did well when she was a nurse in Chicago and what have you. Um, that there are more layers to the Chicago story. I'm gonna give you the short version. But yeah, so when my father, he didn't want to marry her. In fact, he wanted to have an abortion, you know, and she wanted to have me, you know, and so there was friction, there was tension there, and what have you. Um, though they had a relationship, they were together for maybe about 5 or 6 years or what have you. And but she said I would take care, I'd do it myself, you know. And she had family back home in Florida. When things in Chicago got kind of shaky, There was a lot of issues in Chicago in the '70s, man. Chicago was, I mean, we were on the west side. We were on the west side at that particular time. There's a south side story, but there's also the west side. You know what I mean? And there was snowstorms. I watched my mom get robbed. We got broken into. I mean, we were victims of robberies, which I was privy to. I remember them vividly, even as an adult. You know what I mean? And I watched my mom get her purse snatched. You know what I'm saying? Walking down the street. You know what I mean? And her sister said, "It's time for you to come back home." And she went back to Florida. She took me back to Florida, and I was with my. Matter of fact, my aunts. One of my mom's baby sister, she drove from Florida with her then boyfriend to Chicago, and picked me and my mom up, and we drove back. She was living in Orlando at the time, um, and then we stayed there for a minute. And then we moved to Miami, where her other sister was, and then we just ended up staying in Miami, and I wound up growing up in Miami.
Okay. Okay. I know a little bit about Miami, but we'll move on. What brought you to YouTube?
2020.
Okay.
It was, yeah, man. 2020 and COVID, George Floyd, the election, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and everything like that. Um, and it was mainly the election, you know. And I had a lot to say. You had Black Lives Matter stuff going on. I had a lot to say. Um, I was frustrated with the media, mainstream liberal media, and the way in which everything was being covered. I had ideological differences with BLM. I didn't like the way in which um, the deaths of black men were being exploited, for profit, you know. And I saw where they were going with that, and then you had, you know, um, the nomination of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which I did not embrace. Uh, Up until that point, in terms of voting, so I would say this, I'm a political independent. But for most of, my voting life, I have voted for Democratic politicians. Okay. And this team, so I voted for Hillary Clinton, in 2016. I would say this for the record, I reluctantly voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, because in all honesty, I wasn't going to vote in 2016. I almost sat out, and I voted at the last minute. I allowed fear mongering to get to me in 2016. Anyway, fast forward 2020. I did not like the team of the option, rather, in terms of Democrat and Republican. I preferred Bernie Sanders. I would have preferred that in 2020. But you had Biden, you had Kamala Harris, and I was not inclined to support either of them, and I did not think that they spoke to what was happening at that particular time, and I thought they were the opposite. So, and we're going to talk about this with my book and what have you. And so, George Floyd and everything, how he got, what happened to him. I'm like, these people are representatives of everything that contributed to George Floyd. It's not just a conservative right wing thing or what have you. And you see in my book, I said that I state that there's a consensus. It doesn't matter where you are politically. There's a consensus that exists around how Black men are understood and perceived in the society. And the Democratic / liberal option is not exceptional in terms of how they have dealt with Black men. So it's like, and I would say this, and I say this on my YouTube page. I called them cops. I called Joe Biden a cop. I called Kamala Harris a cop. And and I'm like, these are the people who support, Derek Chauvin, the guy who had his foot on the neck of George Floyd. And I'm like, why should I vote for these people? You understand? And so I was very perturbed. I just didn't like it. There was a lot going on in 2020, and what was going on with MSNBC and CNN, all the mainstream stuff. And I'm like, the commentators. So it was out of sheer frustration, and it was like, I'm an academic, and I didn't like what academics were saying at that particular time. I'm like, I dissent. I'm a dissenter. And, you're not going to see me. We here. You're not going to see me on MSNBC. You're not going to see me on CNN. You're not going to see me on any of these, um, liberal media outlets, that are corporately, funded and what have you. But we got YouTube. And so I was like, I'm going to make my little contribution and, create my own little place here and niche and say what I think. And that's what I did.
Okay. I have, yeah, and you get to this in the book, and I made this observation myself that there's a real, in terms of Black people in politics, there's a real shell game, being played over, okay, what you should vote for, who you should vote for, but then you also have to stop and ask, what policies are they bringing in? What policies are they shepherding in? And a lot of times those questions don't get asked. It's just, this person looks like me, so because they look like me and they're the first X, Y, or Z, we need to throw all of our support behind them. Okay. All right. So that's two more little how should we say, building blocks.
Oh,
so in Beyond Death and Jail, you talk about the Black church. Was that a part of your upbringing, and what was that like?
Yeah. So I grew up. My mom, she was what we would call, my mom was she was Pentecostal. She was a part of non-denominational churches. There's a Pentecostal denomination called the Assemblies of God, and she went to their churches. Those churches tended to be kind of interracial and everything. But she also, she affiliated with certain Black churches and what have you. I became acquainted with what we call the Black church in an official sense when I was like 18 years old. And I did this on my own. And it was really, I started with Baptist churches that were affiliated with the National Baptist Convention Incorporated. So that's when I was in college, and there was a church. So to speak to your question, I grew up as a church kid, and I grew up going to church and all of that, and with values that reflective of a church kid and everything like that. And growing up with a mother my mother was a very kind of missionary oriented person and stuff like that. My mom used to go. I lived in Miami, so my mom, she was missionary. She would go to where the prostitutes were on 79th Street, Miami, and pass out tracts and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And I'm in the backseat of the car. You know what I mean? And so she was really into social ministry and everything like that. She was always about feeding poor people and everything. And so I was always with her. So that was my kind of experience. I was in a household where my mother She believed in, taking care of the poor. She believed in Sunday school and, you know, teaching kids about the good news and stuff like that. She was missionary oriented, and I would just say that I made different choices when I was 18 because I didn't like those interdenominational so-called, you know, um, mixed race churches, and so I hooked up with a Black Baptist tradition, and wind up becoming a minister. Later on, became an ordained minister and everything like that. And so I was with, traditional Black Baptists, working class Black people, churches ran by Black men, um, men from another generation, Southern Black men from Georgia and South Carolina. So in Florida, we had this thing. So in Florida, if you were in Miami when I was growing up, you have Blacks from South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama. So if you were in Liberty City, if you're in Overtown, if you were in Carroll City, the vast majority of the Black people that you encountered, they came from those states. They were from Alabama, South Carolina, and Georgia. And they brought everything from that part of the the southern, some people call it the lower southeast or whatever, with them. You know what I mean? And it was in the church culture and all of that. You know what I mean? And it was Geechee. So when you're talking about the South Carolina part, very Geechee. A lot of South Carolinians migrated down. They came from Bamberg, they came from Beaufort, they came from other parts of South Carolina, Charleston, or what have you. Because the railroads were very big in South Florida and everything, and they brought the culture with them. You know what I mean? And so it was a part of the church culture. And the Black Baptists have always historically been the largest denomination in terms of Black people. They always had kind of a captive audience. So I grew up with those traditions, and so those Black men, the Black ministers who had the most effect on me, so these were Black men. They was from the silent generation, they're from the boomer generation and stuff like that. Most of them significantly older. So my pastor, Arthur Jackson Jr., he died in 2005. He was in his 70s when he died, and he grew up in the holiness tradition in South Georgia and what have you. Then he became a Baptist. He was probably the most prominent Black ministers in the state of Florida, And I grew up I came up under him. He was the one who brought me in. He was the one who licensed me. He was the one who ordained me. I was a teacher. I taught Sunday school. I worked with the missionaries. I did everything inside the church. You know what I mean? And so I would just say this: when I was 18 years old and I entered into that, I saw things about Black people that previously I hadn't seen, in a good way. That I mean, for the first time, I'll be honest with you. So, like, when I was 18, I mean, I saw organized Black people. I saw, oh my, these are organized Black people. You know what I mean? Under the auspices of this Baptist tradition, Christianity, and all that kind of stuff. And as I went along, I dealt with the Kojics, the Kojics, and the Methodists, and the other people, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But to get to what you were saying, basically, I was always a church kid. I was a church kid, but I was a different kind of church because I was growing up in Miami, and I had one foot in the church stuff, but I had another foot in the streets. you know, because I was single parent household, running around. All my friends, all my male friends, all of us came from single parent households. All our mamas. My mama was a nurse. My best friend's mama was his mama was a correctional officer. You know, my other friends' mamas, they worked in hospitals or whatever. You know what I'm saying? We were all being raised by women who were not married. Okay, and I didn't have any siblings growing up. I'm my mom's only child. You know, and so and so I had another side and everything like that, and so and I was pulled by the youth culture, you know, at that time and all that, you know, and everything. So anyway, I tell people I had 1 foot in, 1 foot in the church, 1 foot outside the church. That's how I grew up, you know. But I would say that, and it was a balance, you know, and I would say that, you know, as I grew older and as I saw, because I have friends who are in prison now. I have a good number of friends who didn't their lives did not fare as well as mine. Okay, and I would say one of the reasons why, just me personally, I think I've kind of survived is because I kind of attached myself to, you know, certain values and commitments that, you know, kept me out of trouble.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I will share. I'm usually discreet about my private life, but I do have a former plus one who was from there, so I got to experience. Uh, I saw some of the things that you just described. Uh, a single mom, and her mom was in the church quite a bit, and she was into some other things. And then you also in Miami, you also have it's an international city, literally. So that there's just a lot there for a young person to experience and
Yeah,
get into.
absolutely. So the thing was, I mean, this was before, you know, people talk about, you know, even today, you know, Miami has this luxury image and South Beach and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I was there at the ground floor. Okay, and it was like I know what South Beach was before it became a thing. You know, I mean I know that whatever debauchery associated with South Beach right now, it was there, it was hidden, it was underground or what have you. Um, it didn't have the kind of publicity that it has now. You know what I mean? It was a different thing. But I saw it from the ground up. You know, I saw because Miami, you know, I tell people Miami in the '80s, it was an outlaw city. You know, it was an outlaw city. It was a cocaine city. Cubans and Colombians and Jamaicans and capitalism and all that kind of stuff. Man, it was that kind of thing. You know what I mean? We were, you know, New York City was our cousin. You know, they were cousins. You know, it's just Miami at that when I was growing up, Miami was probably a slightly slower version of New York City. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna squeeze in Reynolds' question here. I saw some of this on the news. There are these No Kings rallies. I guess it's uh, an adverse reaction to President Trump. He says, like to know if you heard the speech from Mehdi Hassan at the No Kings rally, where he only mentioned Black women holding down Black people. I don't know if you heard it about any of that.
No, I haven't. I haven't. And
But
you know, mhm.
I think what this is getting to is the leadership position,
Yeah,
the matrifocal leadership position that's been. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah. So I hadn't, and in all honesty, I haven't been paying attention to some of that stuff that's happening right now. Um, yeah, and I'm not surprised that you know Hassan would talk like that and what have you. I mean, that's just a it's a dominant narrative that they've used, and you know, it's just pervasive in liberal media, you know, and in other places as well, you know. So I'm not surprised by that.
Okay. BGS says simulcasting your show, bringing more eyes. Well, I appreciate that, BGS. Appreciate that. Okay, so yeah, so what you described about your friends' mothers and the mothers in your family all being single, and with this, what Ray just described, it gets to that bifurcation, that generational shift that happened around the 70s. One more building block question before we dive into the book.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I didn't like I said, I'm from the STEMs, so I it wasn't until reading Dr. T.S. Johnson's book and now reading your book that I really started to grasp the power of the humanities and religious studies and cultural studies and sociology, social work. Shout out to EGS. We need to support our scholars. I'm now starting to understand that now what we're seeing is literally the academy has the ability to shape the minds of the young people going in there. So you're hearing stories about young people going in one way, and then they come out and their parents don't recognize them. That's number one. But also, this is where the government policies are coming from. And so those professors, in their research, they have a lot of power to basically control and dictate the future of society. Have you observed that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that's fabricated. You know, the reality is that. So I'll give an example. So media, you just had this question about Hassan and everything like that. So you have that kind of thing happening because you do have. I'll just say this: you do have black women in media, who are products of this type of education, and they carry that into their profession. So I'll give another example. So, you know, recently you've seen these stories about black women losing their jobs, like 300,000 jobs are being lost by black women and stuff like that. One of the reasons why you get that type of narrative, here's what you want to think about it. They're not talking about the total losses of job in the entire black population. They're only talking about the losses of jobs in terms of black women. And the reason why you get that is that in those arenas, you have people who have been educated to only see things through the lens of, you know, one gender, one population. And so you get researchers who do that, you get journalists who do that, and what have you. And it goes back to how they're trained and how they're educated. Rather, I say this. You know, in women's studies, in literary studies, in sociology, in other areas in my field, religious studies, and what have you. It's just across the board. They take this education into those professional arenas. So they'll take it. If it's not the media, it's in education kind of writ large. So K through 12. Okay. And so, I mean, one of the reasons now, like Trump administration has been kind of trying to dismantle the Department of Education and all that kind of stuff is because of the relationship between the Department of Education and universities and schools of education in universities, and how schools of education in universities are impacting educational policy. You understand? And so that's one arena. The other arena is the realm of law. Okay. It could be criminal law, it could be family law, civil law. Okay. And you have people who have law degrees, lawyers, who are oriented in that way. You understand? And they have, and those ideas are there as well. So no, it's a very, very real thing, that you have one population that has been targeted, and it goes back to my thesis about bifurcation over decades, and they have been conditioned intellectually and ideologically in a certain kind of way. And when they become professionals, their conditioning is a part of what they do. So they can't see the entire population. You know, as I said in my book, if you see it, I said that Black Americans represent more than 40 million people in the United States. More than 40 million. Okay. If we were to just simply relegate ourselves to these people who have these narrow views, you're dealing with only, you're dealing with at minimum half the population. You're dealing with maybe 21 million out of that 41 million. You know, so you know, Black people 13%. This is the kind of common number that you get in census numbers. 13%. You're a mathematician. 7% female, 6% male. What does it mean when you're only concerned about 7% out of 13%? Everything that you get, all the information that you get about an entire population is tailored according to this 7%.
Yeah.
This is miseducation, misinformation.
I just thought about Dr. T.S. Johnson's flat blackness there.
Yeah.
You're making assumptions and decisions based upon one gender and spreading it across the entire group.
Yeah. The idea that what's good for Black women or the Black female population, what's good for them is good for everybody, which is a fallacious assumption.
Okay. Last question before we segue into the book. Religious studies. What made you decide to pursue an academic career in religious studies?
Yeah, so I graduated from Florida International University. I was in the social sciences, and at my school, you had the opportunity of earning a degree in two areas. So in my department was a department of sociology and anthropology. And so I was social scientifically oriented at the beginning. And at the beginning, I wanted to do work in terms of social science. You know, just radically empirical, you know. But I also had these other sensibilities that are not accommodated by the social sciences, you know, in terms of religion and philosophy. And, you know, so when I talk about that, it's like, you know, there is a place where scientific reasoning does have limitations in terms of thinking about how human beings exist in the world. Okay. And so when we talk about belief systems and we talk about, you know, orientations, when we talk about how people actually move in the world, yeah, you can't reduce that to empiricism, you know what I mean, or, you know, the scientific method. So anyway, you know, this whole theology. So I also had an interest in theology and philosophy, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to become so why did I do religious studies? Is because I didn't want to become a pure social scientist. And I was more inclined towards the theological and philosophical kind of bent that, you know, I preferred and what have you. And so that was it. And then also, vocationally, I was working in churches and ministry and all that kind of stuff. And so, and I wanted to go. Here's the thing. So I attended a theological school. I attended the interdenominational theological center in Atlanta, Georgia. So I went to a theological school to study, those things and what have you. So that's what happened. And I wanted to become a scholar. I was going, we called it kind of a scholar minister ideal. I was working in churches and all that kind of stuff. And I was into what we call kind of liberation theology, the social gospel, and, dealing and, liberating poor people and stuff like that, and doing it from the standpoint of how I understood Christianity and religion, So that's kind of the basics of how I wound up taking the path that I did. Mhm.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody, let's segue into Dr. Neal's book. So this is from my perspective. So, and everybody, Dr. Neal put a lot into this book. And I was telling him beforehand, I shared the questions with him. I had to write down some of the vocabulary words, and there's so many. It's a bit of a history book too, because it introduces figures like Bell Hooks. We're going to talk about her, but Orlando Patterson and Clarence Thomas comes up in here, and there's so many people that come up in here. I really had to take detailed notes about what I was going to ask Dr. Neal. So this is a powerful book, and from my understanding, it really pulls back the curtains and outlines how, and more importantly, why this thing we call Black America has spiraled out of control and in many instances fractured. Emphasis on the word fractured in the post-civil rights era. We lived through a lot of this as Gen Xers, though we didn't know what we were living through as time was transpiring. I would argue that our folks didn't really know what was transpiring and why things look the way they do now. So Dr. Neal, just briefly, what compelled you to write Beyond Death in Jail?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, I would say let's go back to 2012. 2012, with the killing of Trayvon Martin, and he was killed on February 26th of 2012, and it was his murder and the aftermath, what happened ensuing to his murder, that pushed me. And it pushed me because Trayvon Martin, he was 17 years old, and we're in an entirely new century. This is not 1955 when Emmett Till, was lynched, killed, and murdered, destroyed. Okay, it was not that, and that's like, this is Emmett Till, and up until that point, there was a pervasive consensus that this was not the reality for Black boys and men, and this was not a masculine reality. That up until that point, it was assumed that this could not happen. With all of this dynamics and what have you, and I'm speaking from the standpoint of an academic. So here's the thing: there had been great resistance in my realm, in academia, towards engaging in the realities of Black masculinity. And this is why TSN, Dr. Johnson is here, and we got Dr. Tommy Curry and everything doing their things. There was hostility towards engaging the realities of Black men and boys in the United States. It was across the board. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes something horrific like Trayvon Martin and others to get the world's attention, you know. And I hate to say this, but in terms of the Black population, death is so normalized amongst us, like Black male death is so normalized and so ordinary and regular and mundane, that in order for a lot of us to think twice about it, you need, like, it's not enough to have one Black person hanging from a tree, or one Black man. You got to have at least 10 Black men hanging from a tree to get us to wake up. That's kind of because we're very reactionary. And it happened during the Obama era and everything like that. And here's the thing. I had come to the conclusion that this regime, and I'm going to say this, there was a regime of censorship and repression in my world, my academic world, about these issues. And that I needed to speak directly to this regime. I needed to criticize this regime. And I'm like, well, this is no longer, this is not acceptable. We can't sit around here and play with this, play with death. Because up to that point, in my mind at that time, we were playing with death. And that's what that's kind of what sparked it. That's the beginning. The other part of it is that I realized that in my lifetime, this is something that was a part of my lifetime. So it's like, no, it's not just about Trayvon Martin. This is much bigger. And the theme of death in jail has is characterized my entire lifetime. And, going way back to, being 18 years old and living in Miami and seeing what was happening and watching people die and go to jail and being fearful of my own existence and mortality, my own mortal issues. I mean, there's no guarantee. And I said this in the book. I mean, in terms of my own context, if you make it to the age of 40, you've achieved something. You've achieved something as a Black man. You understand? And and I say that given the fact that so many knocked down before the age of 25. You understand? And so it was like, this book is really, apart from Trayvon Martin, but connected to it, it is the culmination. I decided to write it. It was a culmination of what I have been thinking through since I was 18 years old. So, and I say this in the book, this book represents what I have thought about for the bulk of my adult life. Trayvon Martin in 2016, not 2016, but 2012, he's a marker. He's a significant historical, political marker. Trayvon is a turning point, because it's with Trayvon that you have, quote unquote, Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff. A brand new generation. Because it's absurd to me that in 2012, we have to go back to 1955. It's like, what is this? A 17-year-old. I'm an adult. I'm a full-blown adult in my 30s at this time. You understand? And I'm like, this is crazy. This is absurd to me. You know what I mean? And there's not enough concern with among the people who have the same education as I have, who have the same access, or you want to call it privilege, intellectually. And somebody need to say something about it. And so that's how the book was born.
Okay, give me a second here. So it looks like BGS says we have 112 watching here. Okay, so hello to everyone over on BGS's platform. Thank you for being
BGS
here.
Edmore, shout out to BGS.
Yep, support your scholars. Yeah, if you have questions or anyone wants to super chat the channel, that's always welcome. BGS says link the book doc. I've included the link. I've included the link to Amazon in the description box. I'll drop it in the chat right now. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the decade of death. So you cover a lot here, and a lot of people come up, but the backdrop of the book is essentially the decade of death. So you mentioned Trayvon, but we know that other individuals met their untimely demises in that decade. So you were seeking to capture all of them, right? With that?
Yeah. So the thing was, so the decade of death is a dominant kind of theme in the book from beginning to end, and it's the decade of death because this is the decade from beginning with Trayvon, 2012, February the 26th of that year, to the anniversary of his death, which is in 2022, February the 26th. You have 10 years. You've got 10 years of police violence, 10 years of violence in terms of people who were not law enforcement people killing black. So you've got Tamir Rice, you've got Michael Brown, you've got Alton Sterling, you've got Walter Scott, you've got George Floyd, you've got Ahmaud Arbery, you've got Jordan Davis. You've got, if you look at that 10-year period, you got all these murders. They were either killed by law enforcement or private citizens. Okay? So Trayvon is killed by a private citizen. Jordan Davis, a private citizen. Okay? Michael Brown, police. Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, police. George Floyd, police. Ahmaud Arbery, private citizens. So it's like you got state sanctioned violence, and then you have this citizen violence. And it's like, well, what do we do with this? What is this teaching us? What is this teaching? What do these deaths teach us about the black male situation in the United States of America? And my conclusion was that it's bigger than violence. It's bigger than police. It involves police violence, but it's bigger than police violence. It involves these private citizens killing these black men, but it's bigger than that. It speaks to a condition of non-incorporation. These are black men and boys who have not been incorporated into the mainstream of American society. This represents, so there was, there's a scholar, he died years ago, named Manny Marble. He wrote a book, it came out in 1982, which is called Capitalism and the Underdevelopment of Black America. It came out in 1982. All these murders represent the underdeveloped, unincorporated condition of this population of black men in the United States. So these men, and George Floyd kind of personified this. These were men who were not absorbed. They were not incorporated. They were not. Desegregation meant nothing to them. Desegregation, integration did nothing. Okay? This is your working class. This is your lower middle class. This is your lower class. These are the people that we really, in our society, don't really care about. So there's a class issue here. That's why it's race and class. These are what Tommy Curry calls the man knots. And these people, this population is vulnerable. It is overly policed, and you can engage in any type of violence towards them without any repercussions. You understand what I'm saying? You can do that. So that's what the decade of death exposed. It exposed the underdevelopment of huge sectors of Black America, what I called unincorporated Black America. A Black America is different from myself and yourself, who are part of the mainstream of U.S. capitalism.
Okay. Okay. Now I have another question, but I'm gonna interject something here. Since you talked about we were talking about politics and presidential elections, I don't think a lot of people understand the importance of the United States deindustrializing and what that did for these men that you're talking about, these men and boys, because me and you, we went ahead and got college educated, so we have white collar careers, but I saw the importance. Now, whether it can be done or not, I saw the importance of someone talking about that we deindustrialized, and we need to figure out how to bring certain things back if we can. But other folks just kind of shrug their shoulders and say, "Well, who cares? I don't." But though these unincorporated men and boys and people, these are things that were taken away, and that goes back to, and I'm going to say a bad word, Judge Joe Brown. Yeah, that's a bad word to some people. He talked about that the prisons are nothing but grain silos for labor for which we have no use for at this time. So, but nobody's talking about that on a large scale.
No one is talking about it. Unfortunately, no one cares. Your elites, those at the top, all of them, they don't care. And these are, your abandoned. That's why I call them unincorporated. They are unincorporated. The difference. So what happened? The civil rights movement in the policies, 1964, Voting Rights Act, I'm 65, I'm sorry, Voting Rights Act, the 1964, Accommodations Act, and then you had the Civil Rights Act of 1967 and everything like that, and they introduced sex into it and everything like that, which had it bolstered the position of women in our society. Those things were part and parcel of the opening of American society to select members of the country. You understand? And so the reality is, and here's the reality, is that we don't like talking about class in this country. Americans, just Americans in general. It's not a Black American thing or any, it's not specific to any particular group, but Americans don't like talking about class. And we particularly don't like talking about race and class, and just for the information for your audience, my first book that I wrote in 2012, it's called Democracy in 21st Century America, Race, Class, and Religion in Region. And this is published by Mercer University Press. If you want to get it, you can get it from me, because I have all the what they had left of the stock. But here's the thing. In that book, I talked about what I called it Third World America. Okay, and so and just give some more context. Hurricane Katrina. So one of the things that Hurricane Katrina did in 2005 when it happened, and we're 20 years removed from Hurricane Katrina, you know, we had the anniversary back in August, is what it exposed. It exposed this condition of underdevelopment that had been radically ignored. And, you know, at that particular time, the conservatives, who were very, very loud, and here we are again, with the, you know, with this new iteration of conservatism. You know, they were saying that these black people can't pull themselves. They need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. And, you know, the reality is that you can't understand what was happening in New Orleans and all those poor black people that we saw, through a kind of bootstrapism. I mean, this is the consequence of policy. This is the consequence of neglect and everything. We saw how the government acted and everything. We saw how they were treated as they were relocated to other cities and everything, you know. And that was the impetus for that book. You know, it was Hurricane Katrina that inspired my first book. But it was about race and class. We don't like talking about the race and class. And you're right. And Judge Joe Brown is absolutely correct. I'll tell you this. I recently watched, on HBO Max. I recently watched a documentary on prisons in Alabama. And for those of you all who are unfamiliar, so there's a documentary called The Alabama Solution. And it's a documentary that was created over, I believe, a 7-year period of time. And it was based on cell phone data. So you had these prisoners who had access to cell phones, and what they did was they became documentarians with cell phones. And they worked with people outside the prisons, and they documented what was happening in the Alabama prisons in terms of the treatment, the violence, particularly how they were treated by guards and everything like that. And they talked about just the depraved conditions that they were living in. You know, rat infested buildings and just all kind of unsanitary conditions that they had to live in. You know. And these guys, they were being leased out by the state. You know, they worked at the governor's mansion. They worked for various private entities that were contracting with the government for labor. You know what I'm saying? And these are and these people, they really don't have any advocates. You know, and in our honesty, our society doesn't really care about them. You know, and they are a part of a machine, a profit machine that, you know, makes money off of them, and it keeps it going, you know. And yeah, this is why, you know, when Kamala and Joe was put in front of people in 2020, I was like, I ain't voting for them. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, you know, I mean, here's the thing. It's like with the right, the right is honest about what it is, right? It's like, it's honest. They're not, you know, super champions. You got some exceptions, but they're not trying to play a game that they, you know, are about radical justice or whatever. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I don't want to deal with these fake people who are just one side of another coin. You understand? And so in 2020, I voted third party. I was third party. And I voted third party in 2020. You know what I mean? Because it was like, you're not, Kamala and Joe are not offering a better alternative than Trump, you know, and Pence and everything like that. You know what I mean? And so, to get back to what, you know, the initial question is, yeah, we have a population of people who are seen as disposable in a broad spectrum, but they're useful in terms of labor. They're useful in terms of labor. Prison labor that can be contracted. Cheap. We talking about people talking about immigration. Cheap labor. Cheaper than immigrants from El Salvador, cheaper than immigrants from Mexico, cheaper than immigrants from Haiti, cheaper than all immigrants.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna well, we're gonna circle back to the church. So going back to the Black church in chapter 2, everybody, chapter 2, you talk about not needing more messianic figures. So in Black history, we talk about them every Black History Month. We've had several messianic figures and civil rights leaders. You also talk about quote unquote over-churching, the over-churching of Black America. I myself have noticed that our Black churches, especially the prominent ones, like the one I go to, are popular stops come election time. Do you think the Black church is no longer a positive entity for this thing we call Black America?
I would say I wouldn't go so far as to say it's no longer positive. I would say it's it's a co-opted entity. It politically it has no independence. The best of the Black church tradition is independence. So you go back to the founding of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, you know, in the latter part of the 18th century. Richard Allen and Absalom Jones. It was about independence. It was like these men were sitting in these Methodist churches in Philadelphia, ran by white people, and Black people had to sit in the back in the balconies and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It is like, why are we subjecting ourselves to this? You know what I'm saying? And you couldn't even go to the front and pray. You know, you understand, because you were Black. And you know, we can start our own thing. And we're going to create something that is reflective of who we are. So what they created? They created the African Methodist Episcopal Church. They chose, it wasn't just Black, it was African. That is that we ain't white. That's the best of independence. And then you had the Baptist people, they did the same thing. And you had the Church of God of Christ when they came around with C.H. Mason, even though, you know, they didn't, you know, C.H. Mason and the Kojics, they didn't have a super intense racial consciousness in their practices. And what they did, they created an entity that was apart from what was happening in terms of the rise of Pentecostalism. So, and we created our own structures, our own little world, a little kind of Black African world in America. So this iteration of the Black church, and it got co-opted after the 1960s. The co-optation went into overdrive in the 90s. Gradually, it happened in the 90s. It was in the 90s when it gradually went into the overdrive because they were co-opted because you have Black Christians who wanted to be mainstream and they wanted to have close proximity to white people. And that's what happened, you know. And now we are in a mutated version of the Black church. It is a mutant. And it has no, and I'm talking about writ large, and I'm talking about its relationship with politics and everything. It is highly, the ministers, it is so co-opted that for the first time in history, you have black people, and they don't say this explicitly, but you identify in Christian terms the kingdom of God with a political party. That is that somehow or another getting closer to God is synonymous with being connected to this thing called the Democratic Party. Okay, so it's a strange marriage, and people like Al Sharpton have not helped this. Some of a lot of the charismatic preachers, Jamal Bryant, they don't help it. The fraternities and sororities, they don't help it, and what have you. Your middle class, your black professional class, that is, that pushes a lot of the church stuff and everything like that. They don't help. But it's co-opted. It is a co-opted institution. It has absorbed uncritically so much of liberal ideology, and feminism. It has absorbed feminism uncritically. It has absorbed LGBTQ ideology uncritically. It has absorbed everything associated with the corporate Democratic Party uncritically, and the whole platform and everything, and so it's like there's no, at a popular level, no distinction between being a Christian and being a Democrat. The other side of it, and we're seeing this now, is the conservative part, where the conservatives, they do something similar except with the Republican Party, and so but because their numbers are so small, they're not all that impactful. So, you have black Republicans who are Christian, and you have black Republicans who are Republicans only because they see being a Republican as being synonymous with being a Christian. But they don't place any demands on the Republican Party in terms of policy. So the only reason why I'm a Republican is because Republicans support my Christian values. I'm not Republican because I'm concerned about taxes, or I'm concerned about foreign policy, I'm concerned about domestic policy, or whatever. The only reason why I am a Republican is because I believe they are the closest to what I think the Bible talks about, which is a very, and you see these guys all over on YouTube. You see the Black Conservative Perspective and Anton Daniels and other people like that. All these people, they can never talk about policy. And even obviously a political person like he's running for governor now. He's in Florida, the congressman, very articulate guy. He's the congressman. Byron Donalds. Yeah. So Byron Donalds, it's like, the Republican Party is, close to my Christian values, and that's why I think black people should support it, because it's close to our Christian values. And it's, well, what about policy? You know what I mean? I'm like, it's just you got to have. Even Candace Owens. So Candace Owens, she's pushed the conservative stuff. Her thing is about being a Christian. It ain't got nothing to do. It ain't got. Candace Owens being a conservative has absolutely nothing to do with taxes. It has absolutely nothing to do with domestic policy. It has well, to a certain degree, because she talks about Israel and stuff like that. But foreign policy, and it's like the Republicans, the black Republicans who was conservatives, their only rationale for black people to become Republicans is to say that the Republican Party is close to Christ. That's it. And that's not politically, from my standpoint, that's not politically persuasive, because you can be a conservative Christian without being a Democrat or Republican. You can be a Christian conservative without embracing any political party. You don't need no political party just to validate your Christian beliefs. You can be the most hardcore conservative, fundamentalist, orthodox Christian on the planet and not be affiliated with anything. You understand what I'm saying? But you make a mistake. Here's the mistake, and this is a mistake that the Black Democrats make, who are Christian. They don't come out and say it directly, but it's in their actions and their rhetoric. Like a Roland Martin, he's a Christian. Roland Martin is a preacher. People don't know that Roland Martin is a preacher. He's an ordained preacher.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he is a preacher. Roland Martin is he's a Christian minister. Okay, and so and he's very deeply rooted in Christianity. You understand? And for people like him, being Christian and being there's no tension between being a Christian and being a Democrat. They're both the same. They're synonymous. And it's like being a good Christian is like being a Democrat or whatever. They support each other. You understand? That's problematic. That's problematic. And it's problematic when the conservatives do it. When they started, you have all these, and that's the problem I have. I'm going to say this personally, and I know I don't want to take up too much time, but with these Christian conservatives who are all over YouTube and all that kind of stuff, and they talk about the Republican Party, their thing is that the Republican Party is like a denomination. It's like it's synonymous with being committed to Jesus. And that's not political. That's you vote for particular, you vote for taxes, you vote for, what's going on with roads and infrastructure and all these things and everything like that. You can do that without being a Christian or without having any religion. You got libertarians over there. You got people don't talk about it. Yeah, you got libertarians. You got people who don't really care about religion who are on that side over there on the right. You know what I mean? And the economic conservatives don't care about religion. The libertarians, the right-wing libertarians who vote for Republican politicians or conservative politicians, they don't care about no religion. They want low taxes. That's why they over there. So you can be the point, to go back to the original point, Black Christianity in general, in terms of the Democratic Party, it's been co-opted. There's no independence that's there. And to the degree that there's no independence, that it compromises Black people because it's a tool that is used, it is manipulated by the DNC, it is manipulated by politicians, it is manipulated by nonprofits, it's manipulated by the entire Democratic corporate structure to achieve their goals. You understand? And gynocentrism and feminism and all that kind of stuff, they want the church to be a matriarchy. You know what I'm saying? They want it to be controlled by women and everything. They wanted, LGBTQ stuff to be ran through the church so that, Black people outside the church would never question this stuff and just think it's normal and all that kind of stuff. They want that.
Yeah, I will just say, I'll try to be brief here, but there are some elements in there now. And sometimes you're sitting in service. I won't say which church I go to, but there's some elements in there now, and you're kind of like, what is this doing here? And why is this being embraced? And is this supposed to be here? But those things have just been woven in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And everybody, I think you should get a copy of this. And as we talk about this, just think about, and Dr. Neal says this in the book, things need to be questioned. things haven't been questioned properly, and some of these things that we've seen and experienced over our lifetime, some of these things need to be re-examined. So that's one of the themes he talks about in here. Speaking of which, let's move on and let's love on bell hooks a little bit.
Okay.
I'm saying that jokingly. You cite and question numerous authors and intellectuals in Beyond Death in Jail.
Mhm.
One of the most notable ones is Bell Hooks, who appears as early as chapter 1, The Death of a Nation, where you describe her taking exception to the work of Ellis Coase. She is another name I saw pop up in media, but again, I was relatively unfamiliar with her other than some commentary she gave on the movie Hoop Dreams. Can you talk about the significance of the late Bell Hooks and other female and liberal progressive intellectuals like her? Dr. Neal, before you answer that, I'm going to give you the Peter King treatment. We talked about this before, and I have an excerpt from the book. So everybody, I want you to think about, as I read this and as Dr. Neal explains why he focused on her so much in the book, think about what we experienced growing up through the 80s and the 90s in terms of gender in the Black community and how Black men were perceived, and where some of the hostility and just the inability of the genders to get along. Think about where some of this came from. This is from chapter 1. This excerpt reads as follows. Despite the well-intentioned efforts of Coase's work as an intervention, it was dismissed by feminist critics as an unimaginative response to the condition of Black men and boys in America. The most prominent feminist critic of Coase's book was the now deceased Bell Hooks, the Black feminist writer and theorist, whose writings on Black men and masculinity were widely circulated, hugely influential in colleges and universities, and popular among middle-class women. Bell Hooks took exception to Coase's outlook and approach to the lives of Black men and boys in the envy of the world in her widely read book, in her widely read 2004 book, We Real Cool, Black Men and Masculinity. In We Real Cool, the work of Ellis Coase did not meet her calculus of Black male existence, nor did it meet the moral standards by which she measured the lives of Black men and boys. So from there, you can see the perception of Black men and boys. This goes back 20 to 30 years. So there was an effort to shape the perception of Black men and boys, even going 20 years back, 30 years back. But Dr. Neal, I'll hand it over to you. Why did you feel the need to focus so much? Well, why did you need to highlight Bell Hooks and her legacy in your book?
Yeah, because she was a major voice, major feminist voice of her generation. Not just Black feminist, but just feminist voice. She was a prolific writer, smart woman, and she made an impact. And people, like I said, they read her works. I give an example. I was in Brazil. When I was in Brazil in 2021, I went to Rio de Janeiro twice in December 2021. During my second trip to Rio, I went to a major bookstore in a mall in Rio. It's called, the mall is called Oblong. I think it's called Oblong Mall or whatever. And they had this huge bookstore. And they had like 3 floors, right? The bookstore. And I go to the second floor where they have all the literary study stuff and everything like that. And lo and behold, as I'm looking through the various kind of offerings, what do I see? I see Bell Hooks. I see Bell Hooks translated her books in Portuguese. And I'm sitting there. I see Ain't I a Woman? I see We Real Cool. I see outlaw culture. I see other books, the Yearning, all kind of stuff. She was a prolific person. Okay, wrote a lot of books, you know, and they're translated in Portuguese. Rio de Janeiro. That was her international impact. You understand? So they're reading her in Rio. Not only are they reading her in Rio, but they're reading her in the United Kingdom. They're reading her in Australia. They're reading her in New Zealand. This woman was read all over the world. Okay. And she particularly, thing about it is that she was writing about the black female male situation. She wasn't writing about stuff that was going on in South America or stuff that's going on in Europe, stuff that's going on, in New Zealand and stuff like. No, she's writing about the situation between FBA, foundational Black Americans, men and women, and what she was saying in those books had been exported all over the world. Okay. Yet you got women and gender studies. Her books are taught in women and gender studies all over the country, all over the place. You have therapists, people who being trained in psychiatry and counseling and social work and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is a part of their curriculum with the stuff she's written. And this is a woman who had a degree in English. She wasn't trained in psychology. She wasn't trained in counseling. She wasn't trained, she read a lot of self-help books and stuff like that, but she wasn't trained in social work. You understand? She's just a woman who read lots of books, and she's a very outspoken individual and had lots of things to say from her perspective about white people, about black people, about class, about women and all that kind of stuff. And she did it under the umbrella of feminism. So she was the most prominent feminist of her generation. And she had a lot to say about black men. And if you said anything about black men and you were academic, I'll give you an example. Well, Orlando Patterson, who's a sociologist, if you said something, and then there was Ellis Coase, who you mentioned inside the quote.
So can I interject? So first of all, I'd never heard of either of these gentlemen. So just learning about them underscores the value of this book. And I think prior to Dr. Neal and Dr. Johnson and Dr. Curry, I think the value of this is there were black men advocating for black men in the prior generation. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, Sir Ellis Coase, he was an editor for Newsweek for many years. And he was responsible for a lot of the stuff, whenever Newsweek covered stuff like affirmative action, he was responsible for it. Whenever they covered mass incarceration, he was over it. Stuff going on with black women. I mean, he was responsible for a Newsweek magazine edition in 2004, which had Beyonce on the cover. It had what was the judge? She was a judge. It was one of these black women judges. Melanie Hobson, who was married to a white man in media, she was on the cover, as well as I can't think of her name. She was a TV judge at that time. Anyway, a whole edition on so-called the power of black women in 2004. You know what I mean? So he was a very important person at Newsweek. Okay, and he wrote a book called The Envy of the World. That came out 2004 and everything like that. So her thing was she needed to correct black men. So if a black man, if you and I publicly say stuff about black men, and we might not be talking specifically about black women, because Coase was like, he dealt with the black male-female dynamic, but he was primarily concerned with black men. And in fact, the book was oriented towards black men, and he wanted to give black men some kind of wisdom for how to navigate in America she took exception to it, and she had to respond to it. She got to put to tell a black to literally say that this black man, who is a black man, who's lived the life of a black man, is wrong about the black male situation, and to correct him about the black male situation. You understand? Now, I didn't agree with everything Coach said in his book. You know what I'm saying? But it's like, he a black man. He's speaking from the standpoint of where he is and all that kind of stuff. You a woman, and you're a woman. You ain't never lived our lives. She wrote a book called "We Real Cool" on black men and masculinity, where she talks like she's this godlike oracle. And you see the Matrix? She's the black woman in the Matrix. She's the oracle. All the white males are just at her feet, and Neo is right there, and she giving Neo all this wisdom and all that kind of stuff. That's what she was doing, and I was like, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, we need to get, and this is a part of the larger matrifocality, matriarchy thing that we have in black society. You understand? But she personified this type of female figure who sees it as her duty to tell black men what they need to be doing, to give us grown ass men to give us instruction. In white liberal society, the publishers and everything like that, they're the one who gave her the platform for that. They're the ones who they co-signed all of that. You know what I mean? And in academia, she got this elevated status as this type of infallible. I'm in religious studies, and we have these notions of infallibility, that you can't question stuff, for people to just beyond error. That's the Pope. The idea of the Vatican. The Vatican is infallible. You know what I mean? And what the Pope says, and with the encyclicals and all that kind of stuff, that's the law. It just, you don't question it. It is what it is. And the Pope has been sanctioned by God. And so you had people like that who were given a license to write books like that and talk like that in public. That's why I put her in there like that, because she had a lot to say.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the question of, what changed since the 1970s, and, what kinds of messaging has been propagated through the media and into policy. And it seems to me individuals like this were green-lighted, their work was green-lighted, their opinions were green-lighted, and all the stuff goes out into movies and TV shows and culture, and that helped lead us to where we are now. But it was greenlit. It was greenlit, though. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so the larger context. So she was, and I said this in the text, she was a part of a historical shift. That is that hooks. So you got Oprah Winfrey, and so Hooks was Oprah Winfrey. Yeah, so Oprah Winfrey. So Hooks. So she passed away in 2021, and she was 67 years old, and she's a contemporary of Oprah. She's a contemporary, and she's a contemporary of Oprah Winfrey. And you have to understand these people in terms of a historical shift, because they were not possible. They were not possible before 1970. Oprah Winfrey was not possible. Condoleezza Rice, not possible. Ketanji Brown Jackson, not possible before 1970. They are a product of a major shift in human history, not just American history, but human history. So the stuff that has happened with women in this society over the last 60 years is a part of a shift in human history. You understand? And so they were able to benefit from that shift, you know what I mean, during their lifetimes or what have you. And many of them, in many ways, assumed that their what they articulate, their positionality in the world, ain't got nothing to do with a shift in human history. It was a shift in human. It's like, okay, we just did this because we worked hard and all this kind of stuff. And she wasn't that naive. I think she understood herself and history and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, kind of a larger framework and what have you. But she was definitely a product of the gynocracy. She was a product of the black gynocracy, and she was one of those women from her generation who latched on to feminism mainly because she had a disposition prior to feminism that made her amenable or open to it. Okay, the way she was raised in the particular. She had a father, she had a mother, she had brothers, she had siblings and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? She grew up with a patriarchal dad and all that kind of. She talked about her family structures a lot in her writings and everything. But she is a product of the gynocracy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to. Where is it? Blood Crow says, "I like the way you didn't capitalize her name, Doctor." So I, as an author myself, I did look at that. I said, why are her names in all lowercase? And I looked it up on Google, and that must have been how
Yeah, that was
what do you call it? Her pen name?
That was her pen name, yeah. So her real name was Gloria Watkins.
Yes.
And she chose bell hooks, and she chose to write in her name in lowercase letters.
Yeah.
So that wasn't me, that was her. I'm just, and believe me, no, if she had written her name, if they were uppercase or whatever, and I tried to get that published, like that in lowercase, believe me, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. So good for you, Blood Crow, and spotting that. I spotted that, and I was like, that sure enough, that's what she did. I want to thank Greg Wilson for the generous Cash App. He says for tuition. If anyone else wants to make a donation to this discussion, you can use one of those methods there in the ticker, or you can leave a super chat. Okay, let's moving on. So one of the terms that comes up quite a bit in the book, and I noticed this, which is why I had to write it down, was the demonic imaginary. Do you want to say a few words about what that is and its significance?
Yeah, it's basically a way of talking about evil, and
Okay.
it's another way of saying that black men are evil, and I use the demonic because it's the way we're understood in this society, and the resistance that we get, black male scholars and advocates, in talking about black men in ways that are humane, um, is the result of the demonic imaginary. You know what I mean? So it's not enough. Here's the thing. So it's not enough to say that black men are stereotyped. It's not enough to use social scientific terms. I'm a religious scholar. That's a part of it. Here's the bigger thing. So I'm a religious scholar. And you can look at social scientific research and literature on black men, and they will use language like stereotype, or they will use stigma, all kind of social scientific language to disenfranchise, to talk about the pervasive condition of black men and boys in America. But social scientific language is limited. and you need a different type of vocabulary. And I work in the realm of religion. And in religion, evil is a category. And the thing about it is that, it's not enough to say that these men are stereotyped or that they are stigmatized or they're disenfranchised. No, you have to say that they are seen as demons. They're seen in demonic ways. And when you're seen as in demonic ways, that has consequences. It has social consequences. It has economic consequences. It has political consequences. When you are seen, what is demonic? What is the demonic? When you're seen as a savage, when you're seen as a criminal, when you're seen as immoral or amoral, when you're seen as violent, when you are never given the luxury of being moral, of being human or whatever, is just not there, and yeah, and that's the demonic, says something about the devil and all this kind of stuff. And so I had to use that term, to really capture. So like Tommy Curry, he has the man knot. So Tommy Curry is a philosopher. And as a philosopher, he would talk about man knots and why black men are not seen and treated as men, and how it plays out, in so many arenas. You understand? The man knot is mainly a philosophical critique of the humanities and social sciences and everything like that. But what animates us? So we talk about misandry. What animates the misandry? How do we really understand the hatred of black men? How do we really understand anti-black misandry in a very, very profound way? It's the demonic, that this group is classified as being evil. And there's no other way to really get at the heart of it other than saying that the black male population is plagued by the idea that we are evil. And that we are deserving, because we are perceived as evil, we are deserving of death. We are deserving of jail. We are deserving of social control. All these things. So, here's the thing. So, anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany, you can't understand that without understanding the extent to which Jews were dehumanized by the Third Reich. You see, in order to get rid of them, you got to convince an entire country that these people are not good for your society and that they're not human, and that you have to exterminate them. You have to convince them, and you have to give them a reason for extermination. You understand what I'm saying? And so, similarly, we deal with those dynamics. You see, and so you've seen recently all this stuff in YouTube media about quote unquote black fatigue. Black fatigue. Black fatigue is a dangerous idea. It's dangerous. And the reason why it's dangerous is because it can open the door. It can open the door for the normalization of the demonic. You can say, man, these people are just, you can't fix them. There's something wrong with them. Our society would be better if we get rid of them. We just get rid of them all because you just can't. They're beyond redemption, all this kind of stuff. And that's the danger of ideas like that. Doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's propagated by white people or black people. You're demonizing that whole thing about and the guy, the white guy. Here's the thing: that what is the demonic? The white guy who just got murked, and you know what I'm talking about, the turning point guy.
Yeah, I've been a little mute on that because
I'm not gonna say anything about it. I'm not gonna call his name. I watched what he said about black people. That's the when you go back and you watch what this guy said about black people, that's the demonic imagination. When you say that in an entire group of people, there are over 40 million of us, when you say that all of us are criminal and violent and debaucherous, when you just say blankly that we have no morality, do you know what that opens? Do you know what kind of doors that opens up when you do that? And you get, we're only 13% of a population. What happens when you convince the entire society that this group is this way? And that and what happens when you get people who come on the scene and says, you know what, we need to do something about this group since they're so bad? What you gonna do with them? You don't want to educate them. You don't want to improve their socioeconomic circumstances. What you gonna do with them? You're gonna do two things with them. You're going to lock them up forever, or you're going to exterminate them. That's what you're gonna do. Those are the outcomes. You exterminate them. You put them in prisons.
Yeah.
That's the demonic.
Okay. I want to acknowledge Reynolds. Thank you for the $10 super chat. He says, for the good brothers. Thank you very much, Reynolds. Very much appreciated. And I want to thank Triv for the generous Cash App. Let's see. So moving on, we're almost at the end here, Dr. Neal. Mm-hmm. So this one hits close to home, I'm sure, for all of us. In chapters 5 and 6, you introduce the terms bifurcation of Black America, the bifurcation along gender lines, and matrifocality. I recall having this discussion with my mother. Hi, Mom, if you're out there watching this, that there are at least some Black women, some sisters who see themselves as a separate entity. And the Foxhole Queens verified that for us in the 2020 election, and now Tiffany Cross, who seems to be the voice for this. It's powerful that you put this down on paper yourself. Can you talk a little bit about this, the quote unquote Ice Cube effect, and to what degree you have experienced this for yourself? Before you answer, I have another excerpt. That's okay, from your book.
No, that's fine.
This is from chapter 5, everyone, which is entitled "Who's Afraid of Black Men, Black Women, and White Saviors?" The white-induced death of Black America has had a major impact on Black American women. This impact is psychological and ideological. The white fetish of Black women over the decades has produced a cult among Black women, a political sisterhood which is tribalistic in nature. This sisterhood, mainly among professional women, is egotistic and obsessed with its perceived sense of magical power. Because it is effectively used by white American society of advanced ruling class white interests on the level of politics, it regards itself as invincible and infallible. What is more, like white Americans who fetishize Black women, this sisterhood sees itself as a progressive and redemptive force in American culture. So one thing, I mentioned my mother I've mentioned her only to highlight that there's well, that's not true. That's not true, because we had that conversation. That's not true. They don't feel that way. The second thing is, I live in DC. There are a lot of quote unquote professional Black women here. And so this is a real thing. And the fact that Dr. Neal, who is from the Academy, put this down on paper, and he made the same observation, I think that that's more than significant. So Dr. Neal, what say you on this bifurcation and the matrifocality and this seeing oneself as a different group separate from the whole?
Yeah, yeah. And the point I make is that it's a matter. This is a matter of social engineering, deliberate social engineering. The bifurcation, that is the division. So you got women and girls over here. You have men and boys over here. And because of policies, domestic policies, you know, the welfare state, and you've got family policies, family courts. You've got criminal justice policies. You have nonprofit organizations. You have corporate America, okay, DEI and all that kind of stuff. Affirmative action before DEI and all of that. You have 50 years where women written large, but Black women in particular, were targeted by the ruling class in terms of incorporation. So, you know, Black women are the byproduct of white people doing this in very covert ways after 1967, by kind of shifting from race to gender. So the dominant story that we get is that the story of American progress is primarily, since the 1970s, is primarily one around race, like civil rights and all that kind of stuff, and anti-racism. My argument is that that is not true. That the dominant story of, if you're going to talk about American progress since 1970, yeah, has to do with gender, has to do with women. So the last 60 years has not been about Black people elevating as a particular, demographic, but it's been about women, beginning with white women and all of that, and then you have other women who are part of that. And so Black women are a product. They are the professional class, and I'm very specific about this. The sisterhood, this tribalism, which is ideological and psychological. It is primarily propagated and championed by the professional class. Okay, and this professional class, as I said, is kind of, they're oblivious to it. It's almost kind of like talking to. I can't find any other analogy. It's like talking to white people about racism. If you talk to your average white person about racism, or you try to argue that racism is a thing, it is not unusual for you to get a white person to push back and say that, oh, I'm not racist, or it's not as bad as you're saying it is, or whatever, or it's not a thing. And and it's like, I work with Black people and stuff like that, or you see they give you all these examples and stuff like that. And the point is that you do have a population of white people in this country who deny the reality of race and racism, and who just don't think that white people, as a population are racist, that they're fair. And it's white innocence. We call it white innocence, right? So you can do the same thing when it comes down to this stuff, this bifurcation, where you can talk to women. I've had these conversations, and they pretend like they don't see it. and it's not there or whatever. But it's like it's right in front of your face. I work in higher education, and it's like, okay, the bulk of the Black American men who are at these predominantly white institutions are basketball players and football players. The bulk of the females who are Black and American, they are not sports people. And how do you help me to understand that in a college or university setting, that when Black people recruited, the Black males are recruited mainly for sports, but the Black females are recruited for other criteria, other things that are going on. You understand? And um, and there's a social engineering thing that is going on here. You understand? If you're talking about fairness and equality, then you wouldn't be recruiting Black males and Black females differentially. You wouldn't be doing that. Okay, you would be recruiting them and admitting them in a way that is seemingly equitable. You know, but you're only concerned with these Black males as basketball players, as football players, when they're employed by universities, they're employed as coaches or assistant coaches or something that got to do with athletics. Okay, you survey PWIs and you survey whether Black males are employed, and you see where they are, where they're concentrated over against everybody else. That's social engineering. You understand what I'm saying? And because I know that we have more range than basketball, than football, sports culture, and all that kind of stuff. There's more range there, you know. And why are we not targeted? And anyway, the point is, so yes, there's bifurcation. It's in the politics. We've seen this since 2016, our most recent elections. We saw it with Hillary Clinton. We saw it in 2020 with Kamala and Biden, all that kind of stuff. We saw it It was an overdrive in the most recent election.
Yeah.
You understand? And again, we're talking about social engineering, which they have accepted. I also talk about conquest and domination. That, yeah, if you want to dominate a population, you have to subordinate the men and you have to colonize the women. And I said this, I said in the same chapter that you quoted from, at the end of the chapter, I said that they are primarily, particularly this professional class, it is a colonized group. I mean, Tiffany Cross is out here with the Nederland podcast with Angela Rye. They just, you see what I mean, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but, Stephen A. Smith said some stuff about Jasmine Crockett, about her professionalism or lack thereof, and her decorum or lack thereof, and her strategy or lack thereof. You know what I mean? Her just whole approach to politics. And it's like, he called her a bunch of B's and a bunch of H's, and he just, just completely defamed her name. You understand? And
Yep.
and from the standpoint of a Tiffany Cross and even an Angela Rye, you're not supposed to question this person, And then you got Andrew Gillum and you got Bakari Sellers on the same platform, walking on eggshells, trying to be politically correct and all this kind of stuff in terms of how you're dealing with these two women, but particularly one, Tiffany Cross, with all this emotion and all this, because she did it on MSNBC when she was on MSNBC. Black men need to follow Black women, and she's a case study. Here's the thing: Cross is a case study because it's blowing her mind. She's Cross cannot sleep at night right now because there is at least 20% of the black male population that does not agree with her, that has moved in a different direction. And she believes that these men have engaged in something that is blasphemous, that is reprehensible, that's something that should be punished or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And she is an avatar of this sensibility, that the women are the oracles. They're the oracles. They're the experts. They know better. They're the know-it-alls or whatever. They are the keys. If you want to really get into who black people are and how to deal with black people, you start with the woman, not the man. You don't worry about the man. You deal with the woman and her issues and stuff like that. She is the key to black America right here. That's a part of the bifurcation, you know. And then you have academia, and the whole system has been complicit in subordinating. Here's the thing: subordinating the black male population, particularly at the level of economics, to subordinate him economically, then politically, all right, while simultaneously enfranchising and opening up doors and incorporating. That's the best word. You subordinate the male, you incorporate the female at a variety of levels. And you do it so much, right, that you produce this perception that the female is exceptional in relationship to the male, that she's better than the male, she's smarter than the male, and all this kind of stuff. And then that feeds into that type of, you know, male-female exceptionalism, feeds into a narrative of American exceptionalism, because you can look at the female and say, she is a model minority. And then you can look at the man and say, well, how come he ain't doing well? She doing well, but he ain't doing well. Well, it must not be America. It must not be a structure. Oh, your complaints about racism are bogus because this person, this female, is doing well. How can y'all complain about racism when the female is doing well? You understand what I'm saying? And then the female buys into it. The woman, she buys into it. You understand? So what happens is that the larger white structure, particularly the liberal structure, can hide its racism, its anti-blackness behind the female. By elevating the female, you can tell the whole world. It's like Obama. When Obama becomes president, Obama was very useful for America's brand in the world after George Bush, because America's image was totally damaged, you know, after Bush. That, I mean, you darn near you needed an Obama to be able to deal with the Arab world, to be able to deal with the Russians, the Chinese, and stuff like that. You know what I mean? To create some type of buffer. You know what I mean? To, you know, get rid of this whole notion of American imperialism. You know what I'm saying? So you hide behind Obama. You hide the empire and imperialism behind him and say, oh, look, we still are the greatest nation on the planet, and we're exceptional and stuff like that. Look, we have a black man who is our face. You see? And you know, and oh, we've arrived. So that has happened with this bifurcation, and that they have been very, very useful in advancing the idea that America is exceptional, and that America is not a racist place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We just have a few more, Dr. Neal. I think, and also there's a connection there between the concept of linked fates, because I think in the next chapter, you discussed how even Dr. Martin Luther King, that was a part of his ethos, was that of linked faiths. We're all under the same tent. We're all in this together, and it seems as though by design that was undone. So now you have this party over here, this party over here, this gender, this group. So we're all under our own separate tents now.
Yeah. So the thing is that before 1970, Black America was not fragmented. So we're fragmented today. And today, when I say fragmentation, it goes back to you got the bifurcation along male and female. In addition to that, you have bifurcation in terms of straight and gay or queer or lesbian or whatever you want to call it. You got that. And then beyond that, you have bifurcation in terms of those who are poor and those who are not poor. Okay, so there are different variations of the bifurcation where you have these different divisions that have been created within the Black demographic. You understand? That did not exist in Martin Luther King Jr.'s lifetime. Now we had class stuff in that world. Okay, regardless of where you were, you had the so-called bourgeois elite blacks, and you had everybody else. But here's the thing: they existed in the same world, and they could not escape each other. So the Black dentist, the Black doctor, couldn't escape the plumber or the farmer or the electrician or the domestic worker. Let's go back to the church. You go to a Black church, and in a lot of Black churches, like in my tradition, you go into a church and you go to a Black Baptist church, in prior to the 70s, and some of it still lasted out beyond the 70s. But the point I'm making is that when King wrote that book, you look at King. So the reason why Martin Luther King Jr. was so effective is that he was connected to everybody. And King had a PhD. He had a PhD from Boston University. King he belonged to a fraternity. He was an alpha. King, he was a member of one of the, prominent Black families in Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? King was able to connect with Black America in a way in which he did because there was a shared culture in reality, and this thing, and everybody knew that he wasn't working class, you know what I'm saying? But the language was similar, okay? And the sensibilities, we sung the same hymns, we sung the same spirituals, even the same blues and all that kind of stuff. You read James Baldwin, you know what I mean? You see, he talks about a lot of stuff. Even, he talked about Harlem, and he talked about the elite in Harlem and, their attitudes and all that kind of stuff. But here's the thing. The elite in Harlem could not sever their ties from the underground. They couldn't, and so we all lived in the world, and we had our differences, but we lived in the world in the struggle against a hostile. Here's the most important thing. We were all struggling against a society that was hostile towards us and didn't care. White society did not care about whether you came from a bourgeois background, that you were a boule Negro, or whether your dad was a janitor and stuff like that. It didn't care. We were all equally stigmatized. It didn't care about male and female, well, to a certain degree, but, and this is the point I made in the book, that White people didn't care about black women. They didn't care about black men. They didn't care about black women. They wouldn't. I mean, it was like, you know, we were link fate means that we were stuck with each other, and it produced the politics, an anti-racist politics against a hostile white society. Fast forward decades later, it was eroded. Desegregation began. Desegregation eroded the link fates. Deindustrialization eroded link fates. Okay. And feminism eroded link fates. Policy eroded link fates. And you know, all these other movements eroded link fates. Where so you have a situation in our most recent time where you have a gay person who's black who sees themselves as gay first and black second and third. Or you get a black woman who sees herself as a woman first and black second and third. Okay? Or you even go, you got a black person, they got a white daddy and a black daddy and a white mama. They don't see themselves as black. I'm mixed race. We didn't have no mixed race categories before 1970. Even when you had those situations, you know, no, you can have, oh, well, I don't want to say that I'm black. And I don't want to say that I'm white. I want to say that I'm mixed race. That's a product of the late 20th century. You understand? And that gives you, you know, you look at Vin Diesel. People used to ask Vin Diesel. Because if I'm not mistaken, Vin Diesel got a black mama. You know, Fast and Furious, if I'm not mistaken. He would never come out. He's from our generation. He would never, I would say there was a demand. I said, what are you, man? Are you black? What are you? How do you classify yourself? You know, what do you think? And some of the stuff wasn't fair. But he wouldn't say anything. And he wouldn't choose a side. And I thought that was cowardly, and I thought that was not a good thing, because 50 years ago, 60 years ago, yeah, it was chosen for you black. And a lot of us, we accepted it. Even the mulattoes. You know, the Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois was black. He ain't call himself mixed race. He ain't call himself colored. Du Bois saw himself as a black person. Walter White, who was one of the first presidents of the NAACP. You can Google Walter White's pictures. He looked like a white man. He was a mulatto. Walter White.
Julian Bond, right?
Huh?
Julian Bond, right? He passed.
Yeah, all them, yeah, but they weren't trying to pass. They identified with being black. So what I'm saying, the point is that we are fragmented right now. We have been living in a fragmented situation, and I mentioned Eugene Robinson's book. Eugene Robinson put out a book in 2010, 2 years after Obama was in the White House, called Disintegration. Okay, and it was called it's called Disintegration. What was it? Something like Dismantling of Black America, whatever. And but the title, the main title is Disintegration. Okay, the splintering. That's what it's called. Disintegration, the splintering of Black America. And he goes through these various different demographics and different class situations happening at that time. And he's basically saying the whole message is that what we've known as Black America is disappearing. It is unrecognizable. This is a Black man who grew up in South Carolina, Orangeburg, South Carolina, a city where I started my career. And he's a bigwig at the Washington Post. And he's living in Washington. You from DC. So in the book, what are you going to do with these Africans? So now we got this stuff with the FBAs and the continental people and the Caribbeans. He wrote about that stuff. Eugene Robinson, you got these Nigerians here, you got these Kenyans here, you got these Ghanaians here, you got these blacks from the Caribbean here, and they are reorienting what we understand of what it means to be Black in America. And then you got this Obama dude who's here, and then you've got this Black poverty class that we've completely neglected. You understand? We don't know what to do with them. And then you have the assimilated Black people who've gone to college, who, you know, they kind of, they don't know what they're going. They don't know what they just assimilate. They like being close to white people. I put it like that. White people with money and power. And the point of the book is that there is no common philosophy. There is nothing unifying this thing that we call Black America. That's the death. That's the death of linked faith. There's nothing that unifies us across the board. You understand? And what has happened to us is unique to us. And King's generation did not anticipate that because they did not live in that kind of world. They had a whole different orientation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was gonna ask you, because you wrote about Clarence Thomas in here as well, but we're running out of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna ask you to react and just give some thoughts on this passage, and then we'll wind down. This one involves the welfare state, and feminism, and how they go together. I thought this was pretty powerful because not many people. I know in my family you talk about feminism, eyes kind of glaze over. They don't really understand the significance of it. But I think you link these together pretty good. I want to acknowledge these super chats. Martin Muhammad, thank you. I gotta mention another bad word now for some people. He says, "God bless Big Discussions. Thank you, Dr. Dunbar and Dr. Neal. Kevin Samuels will be proud. You both can say without the stream deck, I'm a PhD." Okay, that was for those who don't know, that was a popular drop from someone from the class Dr. Neal talked about, the professional class, who touted that as a what do I need to know about securing a man? I have a PhD. John Smith says, "Excellent show, doctors." Thank you, John Smith. Okay, so I'm going to read this passage, and Dr. Neal, please give some reaction to it. So this is from chapter 8. This is a long one, folks, so bear with me. Okay, this is from chapter 8. The saga continues. Cruel and unusual punishment, state-based fatherhood, and the rage for order in the United States. Okay, to the degree that second-wave feminism has defunded the welfare state, it reinforces and amplifies the condition of unincorporated Black America and the marriage between poverty management and the criminal justice system. Among prominent feminist defenders of the welfare state is the political philosopher Nancy Fraser. Her promotion of state-managed and funded household led by women is figured prominently in her collection of essays, Fortunes of Feminism, From State-Managed Capitalism to Neoliberal Crisis. Former U.S. Senator, Secretary of State, and U.S. presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is also among a generation of feminists who also supported the state-based poverty management as it relates to female-headed households during her political career. Her political support for state-based poverty management is taken up in Liza Featherstone's edited volume, False Choices, The Fox Feminism of Hillary Rodham Clinton. Okay, so before I read that, I didn't know that there was a connection between feminism and the state-based poverty management system and the prison industrial complex. I didn't know all these things were linked together. You want to say some words about that?
Yeah. So, so you look at a profession like social work. Social work is primarily it's predominated by women. You have men in social work, and social work has been a conduit for feminism and feminist thinking and ideology and what have you. Feminists were, shall I say, it began with there were the voices of women, critical women, women who were critics of Daniel Patrick Moynihan's report on the Negro family. These were people who were state actors, okay? And they were critical of it because they wanted to preserve a system of benefits that served primarily women. There was an early effort to kind of expand it, to be more equitable so that Moynihan, I'll put it like this. So some of what Moynihan was trying to push was toward a place where men would also be included in the welfare package and everything like that. You understand? And that it would also include a bit more. But Moynihan wasn't pushing welfare. Moynihan primarily pushing jobs. Okay. But the question of welfare was there, and so the feminists were early defenders. They were defenders of the white feminists in particular, defenders of the welfare state. Miss Magazine defended it, and they defended it knowing. I'll put it like this: they were the ones. If you look at early feminist advocacy around poverty and women, they talked a lot about welfare rights. These are welfare rights. Welfare is a right. Okay. And they were doing that as a way of making sure that women were being treated humanely in the welfare system. Okay. But here's the thing. So Nancy Fraser is a generation of feminists who has defended it. She defended it against conservatives. One of the conservatives that she defended it against was a so-called conservatives, Charles Murray. And Charles Murray in the 1980s, he put out a book called Losing Ground. And he was very critical of social policy from the late 1960s to the late 1970s. And he was a critic of social programs. I just put it like that. And he's always been classified as a right-wing person and what have you. There are, I would say that his criticism from my standpoint, I've just said that everything that he said about social programs when he wrote about social programs and what he said subsequently isn't always wrong. I mean, the thing about it is that the social programs, and even, you got people like Thomas Sowell, that social programs, even the welfare state, they de-incentivize certain behaviors. So the welfare state as we know it today It de-incentivizes coupling, nuclear families, what have you. It de-incentivizes, um, work at certain levels and what have you. And it creates, and here was the issue with Frazier, and this was the term that was used, especially, coming out the 80s and going into the 90s, was dependency. And this is where we have welfare reform. And this is why conservatives, like when Bill Clinton reformed welfare in 1994, it was in the face of these conservatives, Republicans, who were saying that we have created a situation of dependency. So we don't want to have a population in this country that are dependent on government relief, in perpetuity and everything. And it creates a paternalistic relationship between the government and the recipient. All right. And people like Nancy Frazier took exception rather, to the idea of dependency. Okay. Because she just saw it ideologically, as she didn't think that the people who talked about dependency were operating out of good faith. Okay. And so she pushed back against it. And as she pushed back against it, she was simultaneously promoting the welfare state. So it's like nothing. The thing about Nancy Frazier and feminists who have written about welfare is that they don't see anything wrong with the way in which the welfare state is constructed. That is, they don't see that you have a welfare state because capitalism has its own limitations, and that you have a problem with capitalism and capitalism incorporating people. That's why you have a welfare state, okay? And at least in this society right here. And these people, these what I call defenders of the feminist defenders of the welfare state, don't see anything wrong with the state management of families. That is, that the state tells you what to do with children. The state dictates to you what family form is acceptable for support. The state is in your affairs. It dictates. It is a parent. It is a paternalistic enterprise. It is. I use the language of poverty management. This is how we manage poverty in this country through welfare. We're not interested in eradicating poverty in this country. You're not interested in creating an enterprise that would help people get out of poverty. You just want to manage it. It's like putting a Band-Aid on it. It's triage. That's all. It's just triage. It is a Band-Aid over a bullet hole, and the feminists are happy with that. As long as you can get a particular population of women, you can get them food stamps, you can get them Section 8, you can get them Medicare, you can get them basic subsistent level assistance that is seemingly better than having a man who is fully enfranchised, contributing productively to a household. As long as you can get that, you're good to go. And the poverty management is connected to other forms of management, the prison industrial complex, jails and all that kind of stuff, because the prison industrial complex feeds off of welfare. The children who are raised under conditions of the welfare state wind up, not all of them now, I'm not gonna say all of them, but they wind up as adults in the prison industrial complex. And feminism supports that. So feminism supports the welfare state and it supports the prison industrial complex. It supports the punitive aspects of American law. So you got to punish men at all sorts of levels. You punish them for not having the economic resources to provide. You punish them in that way, and you punish them in other ways.
Okay. All right. Wow. All right. Okay. We'll just move on. I had a half thought in my mind. Oh, I was thinking of the analogy, treating the sickness but not curing it. But in this instance, it would have to be seen as a sickness that needs to be cured,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't sound like it's being looked at that way from the people we're talking about. And also, I was thinking these particular. In the book, you also talk about the elites. It sounds like these elites, these are not feminist elites who are the recipients of the welfare. These are more of the professional, educated elites. But we can. Did you want to say something? I was going to say we can revisit that.
Yeah. So the thing about it is that they're part of the poverty management system. That is that they defend it, and they don't live it. They don't experience the consequences of it or what have you, but they defend it because in their minds it's a good thing. It's and, and again, they're misandrous and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, here's the thing. So you have, and this is one of the problems that you find in Black advocacy. You have an advocacy class of people who are not convinced that Black people can be agents in their own situations, or particularly the most destitute Black people. They believe that they have to be clients of the state, and all they advocate, they want more state support. When you have stuff like universal basic income, the idea of universal basic income, the idea, okay, and I've seen this recently, UBI, okay, let's give poor women free money. Let's give a woman who has 2 children and and she's having to raise them by themselves, and the fathers are, destitute, they're in jail or whatever. She's just poor. Let's give her $1,000 every month with no strings attached, and just give it to her. And she can take care of her bills and blah, 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 blah. And on the surface, it might, oh, that's a cool idea. But you have to ask yourself, what is the long term? What are the long term implications of that? And then the other part of it is that it's free. Is there such a thing? Is free money actually free? Is it free? Who's giving the money? And what's going to be expected? What is it? What's tied to it? Is the money really, really free at the end of the day? What type of interests are tied to it? So here's the thing: there are people in Du Bois. To go back to Du Bois, the Booker T. Washington. Yeah, there are people. They're Black, they're white, they're all kinds of orientations who make their living exploiting poverty for their own purposes. It's for virtue signaling and all that kind of stuff. You understand? And you give people free money they don't have to work for. That's a recipe for keeping that keeps people in poverty. If you give somebody a house, and I've seen this before, you give a woman and 3 children a house that they didn't have to work for, And I see white people do this, nonprofits and all that kind of stuff. You know, that's a recipe for disaster right there. You did not have to work for this house. You, you don't have the tools, the skills to manage it. What are you teaching the future your daughters? She got 2 daughters, and she think that the houses are given to people for free. That's how life works. That ain't how the world works. You know, and on the front end, it makes the givers look good, right? It makes a billionaire look good.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a billionaire. Look what I did. I got 10 women, and all of them got at least 2 kids. And I gave all of them free houses. It makes a billionaire look good. But you got to follow the money. You got to follow not the money, but the social effects of that and what is involved in that. And so, I mean, we have a lot of people who advocate for stuff like that. Instead of advocating for tools that actually get people out of poverty. You understand? You're just a charity case, a perpetual beggar. You are at the mercy of some savior. You talk about the white savior. You're at the mercy of a savior forever, a white virtue signaling savior. There's no empowerment in that. And unfortunately, you have people who are professionals who that is their stock and their trade. They need a significant population of black people to be poor. They need them to be in and out of prison and destitute in order for them to have viable professions and standings. That's poverty management. Booker T. Washington saw that stuff in his lifetime. You see, and I'm gonna say this, like Jasmine Crockett. That's that type of rhetoric and that style of leadership and that orientation. That's a part of the poverty management complex. That you have to maintain this narrative that the black population has no agency whatsoever. That you just completely victimized. You can't do anything. That you're not free, and that you need these people. You need this class, this savior class, to constantly advocate for you and give you the idea that they're on your side, and they don't want you to move over. So you never. So that's saying politically. So you'll never think about voting independently. Hell, God forbid you think about jumping over to the Republican side. We got to keep you over here. That's how the poverty management works, and it's a lucrative industry for lots of people. Nancy Fraser and all these. Feminism is nothing but poverty management, because they don't have. So you're a scientist. As scientists, your stock and trade is to create solutions for problems, not to just manage problems. You have to find that you have a problem, and you're trying to find a solution to the problem, not to make money off of it. Lawyers do it. Some lawyers, there's some professionals. So, some folks, and I have to think about science. You're a scientist and all this kind of stuff. So, like, sometimes I think about AIDS and HIV and stuff like that, or cancer or whatever, and it's like, there's a lot of money in the disease. There's a lot of money. When I saw the stuff coming out recently, like with PrEP, when PrEP came out and they had the stuff these guys can take, women and all that kind of stuff. That was interesting. And now they're marketing that stuff. It's not the cure. It's prevention, but it's not the cure or whatever. And it's like, AIDS is big business, bro.
Yeah.
AIDS is big business, and cancer, all kinds of cancer, all kinds of stuff. I don't have to explain that to you. there's a lot of stuff that we associate with health and debilities and all that kind of stuff that these experts don't want to solve, or they have the solution, but they're not making the solutions public. You understand
Right.
what I'm saying?
Right.
Because there's too
That
much
was,
money.
yeah, their cash flow would dry up.
You know what I'm saying? The
That's
Tuskegee,
the problem.
it's like, with the Tuskegee syphilis study, I mean, it was not in the best interest of the federal government and Tuskegee, the people there who were involved in that study, to make penicillin available to these men who were dying from syphilis, because there was too much money in treatment and studying it and all this kind of stuff, and research funds and grants and all this kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, yeah, we're gonna keep this hush hush. We're not gonna make penicillin available, and we're gonna get rich as we, keep these black men as guinea pigs, and they just died off one by one, 10 by 10, and everything like that until the last one. You understand what I'm saying? Then they got exposed. So that happens at a variety of levels. And here's the thing about the Tuskegee is that there were black people. These were black professionals, black doctors, black nurses, black scientists, in cahoots, with the National Health Organization, federal government, and using these black men in particular as experimental subjects.
Yeah.
So it's guilty across the board. So these black elites, I don't have it. And I belong to this class. I belong to the
I
class.
do too.
And the thing about it is that I had to decide, do I want to see freedom, or do I just want to be a poverty manager? You see, I don't want to be a poverty manager. Sometimes people kind of classify me as is this guy conservative or whatever? Da, 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 da. I say, no, I don't want to be a poverty manager. I don't want to be a poverty pimp. You see, I'm solution oriented. I'm not trying to manage stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Neal, last question. The conclusion of the book, and yeah, if you're open to come back, there are other elements we can unpack.
Oh, absolutely.
That we have not unpacked in these 3 hours. And by the way, let's see. Passport OG, thank you for the super chat in Japanese, domo in Japanese currency, Japanese yuan. And there's a question here from Martin Muhammad. I was going to ask Dr. Neal this at the end, so we'll address this at the end, because everybody's talking about that now. You end the book, the conclusion with the LeBron James, Laura Ingraham, just shut up and dribble thing, and then you segued into a discussion about yourself and Dr. T and Dr. Tommy Curry. I was wondering the significance of that. Was that questioning things? Was that having your own voice? What was because Laura Ingraham, she's conservative. LeBron's more progressive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the issue was him having his own voice. Was that what you were getting at in terms of you and Dr. T and Dr. Curry, and just questioning things, not being afraid to question things, even though people don't want you questioning things from your station?
Yeah. It's about the censorship regime that we've been subject to as black male academics and scholars, kind of generally, around these issues of black masculinity and everything. And our work, here's the thing, I mean, our work is regarded as controversial. Black male studies is seen as controversial. And perhaps that's right, yeah, because it is controversial. And And it's not a bad thing that it's controversial, whatever. But those who see it as controversial, who are not, inclined to where we are, they see it that way because they've accepted a certain kind of orthodoxy, and and here's the thing: what is the orthodoxy? The orthodoxy has to do with a consensus, which the book is about. A consensus that basically says that this black male population is fundamentally evil, and you cannot say anything about this black male population that deviates from this evil consensus. That is that when you talk about black men, I do this in the book, when you talk about black men, you have to announce at the outset that there's something fucked up with that there's something messed up with us, that there's something deficit about us or whatever. Or you have to say something that that doesn't render us a threat, to other populations. You have to make other populations comfortable before you say anything about the black male population. I'll give you an example. So I cite two authors in the book, two authors who have written important things about black men. One is he's another a religious scholar. He wrote a book called The Ground is Shifted. His name is Walter Fluker. And then there's a scholar, she's a legal scholar. Her name is Angela Davis, not to be confused with the activist icon, Angela Davis. She has a book called Policing the Black Man. And in both of their efforts to talk about black men and boys, they preface what they do by saying, listen, I'm going to say some things about this population, but I don't want women to be offended. I don't want gays and lesbians to take offense. I don't want the trans to take offense. I don't want the immigrants to take offense. I don't want you to look at this and say that these issues are going to overwhelm the issues of these other demographics. So you got to literally, in academia, in certain senses, you got to apologize before you can even talk about black in certain settings. You got to say, well, let me be clear at the outset, this is not meant to offend these said groups. And after you get that done, then you start talking about the black male population. That's the problem right there.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Or you got to kiss all these groups their butts. I mean, this is absurd. This is ridiculous. It's irrational. It makes no sense. And I used it, the engagement between Laura Ingraham and LeBron James to kind of capture a lot of this stuff, because she was like, you need to stay. Laura Ingraham, basically, LeBron James is criticizing Trump at that particular time, and he's being very political, and you had all the Colin Kaepernick stuff going on. And she was saying, we don't want to hear from a basketball player. You know what I mean? You're a sports star, you're a millionaire, shut up and dribble. Those were her literal words. Shut up, we don't want to hear from you. And that's what we are taught. We don't want to hear from you. We don't want to hear your political perspectives. We don't want to hear what you think about America. We don't want. I mean, LeBron James is from Cleveland, and single parent household, dire straits. He know what struggle is. We don't care what you think about what's going on in this country. Just dribble. And that type of mentality is what we have to deal with. And I'm like, today, I mean, at this point in time, that book came out in 2024. I was like, this is no longer acceptable. It's no longer acceptable. And we are willing to offend these groups. I've offended feminists. I've offended the immigrant people. I've offended the trans people. I've offended the LGBTQ people. I've offended their identity politics. I've done it. As I've talked about the stuff that I deal with, because all of these people contribute to this demonic imagination. Ain't nobody innocent. That's the whole thing. You just can't look at Trump and say Trump is the boogeyman. It ain't just Trump. It's not Trump, and it's not just these white nationalists who are easy to talk about. It's these so-called progressives. They're the ones who are also complicit in this stuff and who propagate this stuff. They just as dangerous. A lot of them just as dangerous as these right-wing people who are openly racist. And a matter of fact, a lot of these people are more dangerous because they mask their stuff under this progressive thing that they're about social justice and making the world better and all this nonsense.
Okay. Well, Dr. Neal, I've held you for 3 hours, man.
Oh yeah, man. Time is going by, brother.
Okay, so I wrote this question down myself, but from a different angle. I'm sure you're familiar with George Fraser. He's an 80-year-old gray-haired man, black wealth,
I know
black
Fraser.
family, black love. So he's been making the circuit lately, trying to sound the warning bell about if we don't fix this now, the black people as we know it are going to go away, and no other ethnic group is dealing with this. And he's approached it from we need more love songs to we got to fix it. And I saw a clip of him recently saying, admitting maybe he's been red pilled or whatever, saying, okay, well now being a mother is more favorable than being a wife first. Okay, black women look at being a mother now more favorable than being a wife first. So this question is, Dr. Neal, is the idea of a black community over? Is the black community cooked? From Martin Muhammad.
Yeah, that's a very, very, very good question. And in the book, I say basically that what we call the black community is not. I use this language. I say it is not an existential reality. I say that the black community, as we've known it, as the way it's phrased here, is more of a ideological, philosophical aspiration, demand, need, desire, wish, whatever you want to call it, in the real sense. Because we're fragmented. Here's the thing, we're fragmented. Black Americans are, I talk about the demise of linked faiths. We are a fragmented group. And it's very difficult to talk about a notion of community with so much fragmentation. When you have so many different subgroups and competing orientations or whatever, it's like, I'll give an example. So you have Muslims, the Muslim community. Muslims know who they are. And Muslims have a kind of fundamental, basic, and they have some differences within Islam and stuff like that, but they've got some basic fundamentals that unite them as a group. Okay, and the whole idea of the Ummah, you understand, and they have some agreed upon things. A community. That's the thing about a community. So a community, in its most robust understanding, is something that when you have norms, you have standards, you have things that are agreed upon. Okay, you have codes or what have you. And the problem that we have is that we don't have a set of agreed upon norms and standards, codes that link an entire population together. You understand? And we can't say, I mean, it's so bad. It's like we can't say what is not normative for us as a population. You know, I just saw something on Instagram with Nigerians. I just found out. So Nigerians, some tech entrepreneur, I don't know if these are European people or these are people from within Nigeria. They're creating a Nigerian version of OnlyFans. Okay, yes, a Nigerian version of OnlyFans, and you have Nigerians who are saying, "This is not us. This is the Western world." I mean, that's what they do. That's what the West people do. Here's what I'm saying. They're saying this is anti-African. That the P word, prawn is not an African thing. It's a Western thing. And when people talk like that, when they say this is anti-African, this is not what Africans do, they're telling you that we still have a code. We don't do this type of stuff. It's not a part of, this is not who we are. Unfortunately, we can't, we're Black people in America, we can't talk like that. So what I'm saying is that in order to say that you have a community, you have to be able to say what you're not. And there's too much relativity and plurality, individualism that exists within the Black population to say in a robust way that there is this thing called the Black community. Because right now in the 21st century, it's like anything goes. It's just, there's nothing unifying. Even that's what I say about the church. You can't even look at Christianity, because what passes for Christianity among Black people is really, I'm like, is this really, as a religious scholar, as somebody who's gone through, I'm like, this ain't Christian. I'm like, this ain't Christianity. This is not. I can walk into a church and I say that this is not a Christian church. There's nothing Christian in what you're doing. I can question them. I can say there's nothing that you're doing in this thing that you all call this church, this Black church, that is remotely close to what Christianity is. And I say, what does it have to do with with the founder, Jesus Christ? What does it have to do with it? Because it seems to me that they use the church for everything other than what Jesus has been understood historically among Christians. So it ain't a Christian church. You're pushing feminism, you're pushing LG. What's Christian about pushing feminism? What's Christian about pushing the LGBTQ ideology? What's Christian about that? What's Christian about pushing one gender, period? Here's the thing. Oh, we love Jesus, but we hate Black men. What's Christian about that? She loves Jesus, but hates Black men. Look at the white church, the old white church, even now, you know what I'm saying? These white Christians claiming that they love Jesus. How is it that you love Jesus and you hate this Black American population that's in your midst? How can you talk about a God of love? And that was the moral high ground that Black Christians had over white Christians. Because Black Christians at one time could say that they were more authentically Christian than the white Christian. Because the white Christian did not embody in their practices the love of Jesus towards Black people. So you're a hypocrite. You love Jesus. You can't love Jesus. You can't say for God so loves the world and simultaneously hate Black people. So the point I'm trying to say is that Yeah, this thing called community, it's a very complex thing. And I have some people, there are people who would disagree with what I'm saying, but that's the reality. You look at I'll give you an example. The Somalians in Minnesota. You want to know what a community is? You see the Somalians in Minnesota. Hell, they're being indicted right now for all type of fraud and stuff like that. They're being investigated. Ilhan Omar and everything, immigration fraud, welfare fraud, all type of stuff. Regardless of what type of activities they're being caught up in, they're working as a community. These people are helping each other. They're sending money back to fucking Kenya and Mogadishu and all that kind of stuff to help their relatives and all that. That's a community. Jews, Israel, that's a community. You look at Israel and the Israel lobby and advocacy for Israel, that's community. We've been dismembered. We've been dismembered. And as I said in the book, the Black intellectual class, the professional class is in denial. The Black female is in denial. She does not want to come face to face with the reality of disintegration. Can Black, and to answer George Frazier's question, no. You're not going to have a traditional Black family in a robust way as long as these conditions persist into the future. You're going to have continued fragmentation. You're not going to create families that existed during Jim Crow and even some places under slavery, everything like that. It's not going to happen. Yes, you're going to have a minority of Black men and Black women, as you have right now. At least 30% of the Black population, men and women, they get married, they have babies. It seems to me that that is going to be preserved, that will continue to go on. Now, it might decline. I don't know. I can't look into the future. But it seems to me that at least 30% of the Black heterosexual population gets married. And it seems to me that what we're looking at into the future is just a minority, that minority of the Black population maintaining heterosexual marriages, traditional families, and all of that. But for the rest of the population, no, you're still going to have baby mamas, baby daddies, single men with no kids like myself, single women with no kids, you see. And yeah, and it would take major to really alter it, to move that 30% to something higher, to 40% or even half. But let's just say even 40%, to move the 30% who get married to 40%. That's going to take a lot of work. That takes just a 10% increase is going to take a lot of work, a lot of psychological work. Like I told you, this thing with these women, it is psychological and it is ideological. We're not just dealing with material, we're dealing with the mind. You see? And I will end like this. Elijah Muhammad was a genius. Elijah Muhammad knew, even though the Nation of Islam, never was able to compete with like Black Baptists in terms of numbers, he dealt with the mind. He was a psychologist with a 6th grade education. If you look at the Nation of Islam and their theology and all that kind of stuff, it was about the mind. You got to get that. He had to do brain surgery on Black people to get them to think differently. And this Black woman, she has to have a major psychological and ideological shift. It's got, because she's been programmed psychologically and ideologically. Media, education, music, entertainment, all that. She's been programmed. She's been targeted specifically, psychologically. That's why she is where she is. And to undo that work is going to require serious reprogramming, ideological and psychological reprogramming. And that's a major thing. And you and I, we Gen Xers, you know, we ain't gonna live long. If that would have happened, if it does happen, we're not gonna live long enough to see it. But that's the thing. So I would say this, just in closing, is that the idea of the community has to be placed under a microscope, and we have to confront all of the impediments to this idea of community. And why is it that we don't have community? Like I said, I talked about the Nigerians. They don't want, they start introducing OnlyFans in Africa. Now, they got trafficking, they got all kinds of sexual stuff going on there. But there are certain things that are Western that are being introduced in Africa, in those countries, that are not African, that are not a part of their traditional orientation. And when they can recognize that, that tells you that they have something that makes them who they are. And that's one of the reasons why when they come over here to the US, even though they're not as enlightened as we would like them to be, that's one of the reasons why they separate themselves from us. So the reason the Nigerians separate themselves from us, the Ghanaians separate themselves from us because they have a clear idea of who they are and what they're not. And that says a lot about this whole notion of community.
Wow. Okay. That Dr. Neal, thank you for that. That was very, very powerful. I'm going to acknowledge the super chats. Thank you, Black Guru. He says it's a zero-sum game of oppression in U.S. politics. John Smith says Malcolm X did warn us 60 years ago that liberals, also known as the Foxes, were more dangerous than the conservatives. And thank you for the $10 super chat, Don Mann. Everybody, this was Dr. Ronald Neal, and this is his latest book, Beyond Death in Jail. We went for 3 hours and 18 minutes. There's a lot in here that we didn't unpack, and I'll be thinking about future installments, Dr. Neal, if you're willing to come back and unpack.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That we didn't. Okay, this is everybody. This is a powerful book. This is a lens for the last 30 to 40 years that many of us did not have, that explains the circumstance that we came from to where we are now. So consider getting yourselves a copy. Dr. Neal, do you have anything else right now?
Listen, I want to thank you for being attentive to the contents of the book, and meticulously, I want the guys to see this, and everybody else who's watching, see what Dr. Dunbar. You see, these are Dr. Dunbar's. He sent me these notes. You see this right here? So this is one. Dr. Dunbar is meticulous. Dr. Dunbar sent me 3 pages of questions and notes and everything, which for me as an author, here's the thing. Yeah, as an author, I'm honored by that. I'm honored by that because that means that the interviewer actually engaged it and took it seriously and actually took the time to give me an advance, template for our conversation and everything like that. And that is honor, that's respect and everything. So I'm grateful for that. Okay. And yeah, this is, I'm gonna tell you this, brother. And and Dr. Dunbar he's in the hard sciences. Dr. Dunbar's in the hard sciences. I can tell you, I can hardly, some of this stuff we don't get this sort of, this kind of attention in my fields. You know what I'm saying? Because I get a Negro who read the introduction and the conclusion and maybe some, chapters in the middle, and then, want me to fill in the blanks in the conversation. And there's nothing, there's not anything inherently wrong with that, okay? But I thank you for the attention and for this. And we've been here for 3 hours, and ain't nothing but time and everything. But it's an honor, and I thank you for it. And I'm glad these guys are here, a part of it. And yeah, I have not been showing my face too much on the YouTube streets and everything. I've been doing, work and all that. And so it's good to come back out here in this capacity, and share. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I was gonna say I know in one of his I think BGS did the Tiffany Cross thing, and he said, Doc, you know, you don't have to go in too much. Be mindful of when your channel, your content is forward facing. We kind of have to be careful about what we say.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so because we have jobs and we have colleagues and we have some care needs to be taken there. I learned that myself.
Absolutely.
So okay.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Neal, thank you, and for that compliment there at the end. So yeah, I'll be in touch, and
Okay.
I'd like to do some follow-ups.
Okay.
When we have time.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, guys. You all take care. I'll see you, man. I'll see you soon. Thanks
All
again,
right.
sir. All right.
Have a good night.
All right. I'm out of here.
All right, everyone. Before I wrap up, I'm going to do some quick advertising myself. I've written my own book. Some of you have bought it. Some of you know about this. As it relates to Dr. Neal's book, in the beginning, he talked about that and that he experienced being raised by his mother solely. I'm a child of a marriage, but my parents split, and part of my journey through adolescence and puberty and learning to navigate the world took place without male figures around for my day to day. Okay. So that's in large part what my book is about. That's a main theme of my book, The Engineers, a Western New York Basketball Story. Part one, Innocent Basketball Dreams. This is a boyhood and a manhood journey. Okay, it's a basketball story, but it's a boyhood and a manhood journey. And it talks about what happens when you start something and there aren't men there to mentor you and guide you through that thing on a day-to-day basis. So for my YouTube subs, I've made this announcement. The holiday season's coming up, so consider getting a copy for yourself, or maybe for a young person who's on a similar journey and they don't have a dad or uncles who are there in their day-to-day. For you guys, I'll sell the paperback for $22 and the hardcover for $27. I'll do $27. On Amazon, those prices are $35 for the hardcover and $27 for the paperback. You can use one of those methods there in the ticker. Make sure you send me your mailing address so I know where to send it and who to sign the book to. If you want to use a credit card, there is a Big Words Authors store, an online store. and that is here. I believe the link is in the description box. If it's not there now, then it will be. But if you want to purchase a copy through my store, those are the Amazon prices. They are $35 for the hardcover and $27 for the paperback. I can create a coupon code for you to discount those prices, and shipping and handling is built into those prices. So just a little advertising there. The link for my online store is here. And thank you to everyone who donated. I need to get into the habit. I forgot why I stopped. I need to get into the habit of acknowledging how much the Cash Apps are. So thank you to Greg Wilson for the $20 Cash App. Thank you to Tutrib for the $5 Cash App. And thank you to the Master Teacher for the $20 Cash App, and also sharing this with your audience. Okay. So with that, everybody, I'm going to wrap this up. I need to make dinner, so I'm not eating too late. I didn't think we'd go 3.5 hours, but as I described, Dr. Neal put a lot into this book, and I mean, we could have easily gone longer. So look for follow-up installments to this one. And next week, I have to get questions together for Jeff St. James and ping him again, because we're supposed to talk next Sunday. I don't think we'll go 3 hours, but we're supposed to talk next Sunday. Everybody, thank you. John, thank you. And yeah, everybody, enjoy the rest of your night. As always, remember that your attitude determines your... I haven't eaten yet. Always remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I will talk to you the next time. Chaos Reign, I did not play college ball. I did try. That's the ending of part 2. But like a lot of young men, particularly from the inner city, from the Black community, I did aspire to be a baller at one point. So with that, yeah. All right, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'll talk to you the next time. Take care. Bye-bye.